Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Was Addicted of Harem with Fem Sasuke during Chunin exam. So do 4 blue hearts comment. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon, for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. The streets of Konoha no Sato were filled with people chatting happily, all going about their business. It has been 2 years since the end of the Third Great Ninja War, and more than a year since the start of the reign of the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. The introduction of the Yellow Flash as Hokage was the perfect change the village needed after the long tenure of Hiruzen Sarutobi as the third Hokage. Minato has already made several changes to the village in his time as Hokage, including raising the graduation age for academy students to prevent forcing young children having to get introduced to the battlefield at a young age. He also introduced a new alliance with Suna's Yondaime Kazekage, Rasa, after the war to improve trade relations with them and other minor nations. Iwa and Kumo are still suffering from the war and are staying away from Konoha, while Kiri are dealing with internal issues and have been isolated from the other 5 great nations. The relationship with the Uchiha clan has been improving with Minato as Hokage, with him avoiding the elders' advice to have surveillance on them. Overall, morale is at its highest right now in Konoha and nothing can bring it down. Walking down the street was a beautiful, young red-haired woman with a large bulge in her stomach. This woman was Kushina Uzumaki, the wife of Minato Namikaze, and today was her due day. Minato and Kushina would welcome their son, Naruto, to the world today. Both future parents are elated to meet their child. When Minato heard the news, he was even happier than when he was announced as the Yondaime. Kushina was just as ecstatic to officially expand their family, especially as she is still recovering from the loss of her clansmen over 10 years ago. Today is finally the day. Kushina thought with both excitement and anxiousness. She was anxious due to her burden, being the jailer of the nine-tailed fox. Despite the Kyuubi being securely sealed inside her child birth was the time when the seal was weakened in order for the baby to grow. The 9 months it takes for the female Jinchuriki to give birth, the seal weakens proportionally, as the energy used to maintain the seal is used to help the baby grow. The delivery of the baby is when the seal is almost entirely undone. It is a very fragile situation. It's a good thing Minato is a sealmaster on her level. It also sounds like it hurts a lot. Databane. Kushina thought with a dramatic shiver. The mid-age woman beside Kushina saw this and sighed. Come on Kushina, we have to get to the outskirts of the village. Bawako Sarutobi, wife of the Sandame, urged softly. Kushina nodded as they kept walking. On the way, they crossed paths with a young raven-haired woman with a heart-shaped face and onyx eyes. In her hands was a small bundle. Kushina's eyes brightened as she saw her best friend Makoto Uchiha for the first time in months, with both of them staying at home due to pregnancy. Her eyes landed on the small infant in her best friend's hands. Wow! Is it a boy again? Kushina started gushing over the baby. She loves little Itachi and hopes to see him more after today. Makoto giggles. No, it's a girl this time. Her name is Satsuki. Looking down at her daughter, Makoto smiled. She already looks just like her mother, with the same big black eyes, long lashes, and midnight hair. Kushina smiled and patted her head, making the baby look curiously in her direction. Bawako came up and smiled at the baby. Oh, she is sweet. Hiruzen told me you asked permission to name your child after his father. That must have been before you learned the gender. Makoto smiled and nodded. We were originally going with Sasuke, but if it was a girl we would keep the name close. And our clan was always associated with the moon, so we included the Tsuki. Itachi-kun is already so attached to her. Makoto happily replied before looking at Kushina, who was still cooing Satsuki. By the way, you must be due soon Kushina. You should pick a name beforehand. Kushina nodded and looked at her Uchiha friend. Yep, it's today, and we already have a name, it will be Naruto. Kushina smiled softly before poking Satsuki's chubby cheek. He will be your classmate Suki-chan, so please look out for him. Makoto smiled at the interaction and also was excited to see the child of 2 of her best friends. Kushina and Makoto have known each other since they were academy classmates, and their teams would meet regularly. It also helped that Minato was on the same team with Makoto under Jiraiya. Makoto is nay of the few people who knew about Kushina's marriage to Minato, as well as Kushina's status as Jinchuriki, which is only known to select high-ranking officials. Minato and Makoto used to be genin teammates under Jiraiya of the Sannin. So they have always been good friends and comrades. Her husband, Fugaku, has quite a competitive rivalry with Minato, though they both consider each other friends. Even if Fugaku was a little peeved at not being acknowledged as a Hokage candidate. The four of them would meet quite frequently before Minato got busy with being Hokage and Fugaku with being police force captain. Makoto's musing was cut off when Kushina entered her personal space. By the way, does it really hurt? Kushina whispered, looking agitated. Makoto smiled nervously with closed eyes at her friend's usual goofy antics. So there is something that scares you, Kushina, I'm surprised. The Uchiha commented cheekily. Before Kushina had a chance to retort, she was pulled along by an impatient Bawako. Come on, Kushina. We have to get there by sundown. Bawako ordered while dragging along a sheepish redhead. Kushina waved back to her friend while being pulled along. Bye Miko-chan. Bye Suki-chan. Naruto-chan will be excited to see his Oba-chan later. Makoto smiled as the wives of the Hokages walked away. She looked down at her baby. I hope you do become friends. Later that night, everything was quiet and peaceful. Until there was a ferocious roar. It hurts, Tebane, screamed Kushina Uzumaki in the middle of an Anbu bunker on the outskirts of the village. The only people who knew about what was going on were the third Hokage and his hand-picked Anbu guards, the village elders, and those in the delivery room. Unknowingly to those involved, somebody else was informed on the situation. Obito Uchiha watched from the shadows behind his orange mask, hiding his presence from the Anbu guarding the bunker, as he mentally prepared to rid himself of the last of his previous identity. He was no longer Obito. He was Madara, he who rejects the world. For his plans to work, he needed to remove threats, and Minato Namikaze was the biggest threat of them all. He has already begun to make movements under the mask of Madara. Controlling Kiri from the shadow under the guise of Yagura, the Yondaime Mizukage. He has kickstarted Nagato's turn to the darkness with Yahiko's death. He had Hanzo and Danzo to thank for that. That left Konoha. He was not strong enough at the moment to seal the Kyuubi into the Geto Mazo, he was still just 14 years old. But now was the chance to cause Konoha major damage and they would be less of a threat. With history in his favor, perhaps this could lead to his former clan's demise. Yes, he was a little petty as well. Minato-sensei. Kushina nay. I'm sorry. Obito thought solemnly. But I will see you again in the real reality of the infinite Tsukuyomi. You can spend all the time you like with your son there. Perhaps you could have been there on time when Rin and I needed you. Sensei. Obito clenched his fists at his sides, whenever he thought of his old team. Obito took a deep breath, he is not Obito Uchiha anymore. He is Madara. And with that, Madara emerged. Minato was panicking. Although it was tiring concentration on the seal, with the Kyuubi so persistent on coming out, he felt utterly useless as his wife was in agony. Is she alright? Minato asked Bawako and the midwife, while sweating profoundly. I've never seen her in so much pain. The blonde Kage stared worryingly at his beautiful wife, who's breathing heavily. Bawako looks annoyed at Minato. You're the Hokage, act like it. She shouted at the young man. The Sarutobi shook her head. You men would drop dead if you had experienced the pain of childbirth, but women are strong. I'm sorry Bawako-sama, Minato apologized sheepishly while the other midwife giggled quietly. Kushina squeezed her husband's arm tightly, making him wince. Naruto, huff, better be, huff, a badass be baby because we are, huff, never doing this again. Kushina managed to huff out to her husband as she progressively squeezed his arm harder, making the strongest knee. Nja alive tear up while nodding frantically. Bawako shook her head again at the dysfunctional couple. I can tell who wears the pants in the relationship. She ponders in amusement. Bawako was about to make a comment when the midwife beside her started shouting. I see his head. The midwife, Taji, shouted as they all tensed and then turned their attention to the task at hand. Kushina pushed harder, while Minato maintained the seal. But the Kyuubi was being firm. Minato heard the nine tails roar from inside the seal, which made him more determined. Hold still Kyuubi. Naruto. Hurry up. Minato screamed while the veins on his forehead became visible with the amount of chakra he was pumping to hold the seal. Kushina pushed a few more times, and then the screams she let out were cancelled by the scream of someone else. And it caused her eyes to widen with brimming tears. There was complete silence in the room with the exception of infant screams from a baby with a tuft of blonde hair and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. The silence ended when a wide-eyed Minato whispered a soft, "He's here." "He's a healthy baby boy," Bawako said happily to the couple. After washing Naruto and placing him in a blanket, Bawako and Taji walked over to Kushina, but Minato walked up with his hand up. "Naruto." He called out joyfully, expecting to hold his son for the first time. That Dre, and was quickly crushed when Bawako pulled Naruto away. "No. The mother sees him first," she commanded the depressed blonde. Taji giggled again, seeing her cage pout like a child. Bawako placed the still crying Naruto next to his mother, who had tears in her eyes. "Naruto," she whispered lovingly, "it's great to finally meet you," as she stroked her son's damp cheek softly, stopping his crying momentarily. The other people in the room all watched the interaction with a smile and/or tears. The moment ended when Bawako picked Naruto back up, who whimpered from being away from his mother's touch. There, Bawako cooed the baby. There will be plenty more chances to see one another." Then Bawako and Taji left to get Naruto properly checked up. As they walked towards the exit, Minato held his wife's hand, and smiled down at her. "Kushina," Minato said softly, "thank you." They shared a precious moment with each other, as tears leaked from Kushina's eyes. "Minato," she whispered with a watery smile. After a moment, Minato punched his palm dramatically. "Yosh. Time to seal the Kyuubi and get home." Though before he could start the sealing process, screams sounded from across the room. The couple turned their heads to see the falling bodies of Taji and Bawako, as well as a new orange-masked occupant in the room, holding their minute-old baby in his hands. "Bawako-sama, Taji, Mina," to shouted before glaring daggers at the hooded figure. The man with a single eye said, "Yondaime Hokage Minato, step away from the Jinchuriki," he threatened ominously, "or your child's life will be over in a minute." Minato narrowed his eyes at the man. He was able to bypass the powerful barrier and get past the Anbu Sandaime-sama assigned. Who is this guy? After he thought that, the stress in Kushina's mind caused the seal to weaken. She let out loud grunt in pain as the seal became visible across her body and the Kyuubi attempted the escape. Minato started to panic at the sight of his wife, Kushina. He shouted. The masked man was getting impatient and pulled out a kunai close to little Naruto's cheek. "I said step away. Don't you care about your brat?" he asked as he pushed his kunai towards the baby. At this, Minato started to panic. "Calm down. Just relax," Minato pleaded as he was caught in two minds. Minato could have sworn the man smirked under that mask. "Speak for yourself Minato, I'm as calm as can be." And with that the man threw the crying child in the air, as Kushina screamed out his name. The masked man then jumped to kill the infant but a flash of yellow got there first. As Minato, finally, held his son on the opposite wall. The man seemed impressed. "You sure live up to your moniker," yellow flash, then placed his hands in a ram hand sign, "but how about this?" And Minato's eyes widened as he heard the telltale signs of an explosive tag under Naruto's blanket. Kushina's eyes filled with horror. "Minato. Naruto." Before Minato flashed himself and Naruto with the explosives to a marked safe house with his Hirishin. The Yondaime was able to protect his son from any damage the explosives caused, as they both lay on the lawn outside the recently destroyed safe house, with a bawling Naruto. Minato smiled slightly at his child. "Good, Naruto's not hurt," before he put on a calculated face. "He managed to separate me and Kushina. He wants the Kyuubi for something. But what?" The blonde winced slightly as he pulled out a large splinter in his leg. "Better hurry." And flashed away before the splinter could touch the ground. The blonde pair arrived in a separate safe house with a bed ready. Minato placed his whimpering son under the sheets and stroked his small head. "I have to save Ka-chan now, so I'll see you soon, Naruto." And again, he vanished. Chained up against a rock was an exhausted Kushina Uzumaki. The time right after childbirth should be when the mother relaxes and sleeps, not having a mountain-sized demon removed from your abdomen by a madman. Why are you doing this? Kushina managed to ask in both fatigue and fear. The man seemed to cock an eyebrow under the mask. I'm going to extract the Kyuubi from you, and destroy Konoha. He replied nonchalantly, and Kushina's eyes widened in horror. Stop. You don't need to do this. She pleaded, but it fell on deaf ears. The man entered Kushina's mindscape and said to the demon in chains. Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this moment? And the Biju's eyes widened at the sight of a 3-tomo Sharingan. The rest of the Kyuubi's sentence was cut out. When he fell victim to the spinning red eye of the man that now mirrored his own. Go, Kyuubi! The masked man shouted with narrowed eyes as his pet left in Uzumaki for the first time since the Valley of the End. It roared with power and killing intent as it landed on the grassy earth. Back on the rock, Kushina was breathing heavily as she collapsed, watching with sleepy eyes as her burden walked away from her. She managed to scream out in desperation, wait. The bored-looking masked man turned to her direction. You Uzumaki sure are strong. Don't worry, I'll end your miserable existence, he saw. It is he commanded the Kyuubi to finish off his previous jailer. Kushina shut her eyes as a massive hand descended on her. Just before the claw made contact with, a flicker of speed picked her up and teleported to the top of a tree nearby. Minato looked down at his normally cheerful wife, who he held bridal style. Minato, Kushina mumbled out, why you have tea, stop, I am. Kushina was wheezing after the loss of the Kyuubi. Minato was shaking slightly in both fear for his wife, and anger towards the man. They are headin' to Konoha, you've got, stop them. The fourth looked over his holder and shot the most rage-filled glare he could muster, one that would make all of Iwagakure shit themselves. Minato, Kushina said to her husband, making him turn his attention back to her, Naruto. Is Naruto safe? His blue eyes softened and nodded with a small smile, yes, he's waiting for you. Let's go, he whispered to her lovingly. The next moment, the two flashed away. Madara glanced in their direction, they vanished. Oh well, next stop, Konoha. And Madara left in his respective time-space jutsu. Konoha, meantime. It was an average night in Konohagakure no Sato, with all the children at home. The adults, both civilian and shinobi, out in the town, and a peculiar pair of teenagers. Yosh, my youthful rival, Kakashi. What challenge shall we contest upon tonight? And booming, energetic noise coming from a 14-year-old Chunin with green jumpsuit and black bowl-cut hair. His most distinct feature is his unnaturally large eyebrows. This was Might Guy, son of the infamous Might Dai, and up-and-coming taijutsu specialist in Konoha. Next to him is what many would consider his complete opposite. A teen the same age as Guy, walking lazily next to his rival, while reading an ordinary book. I need something more exotic. Kakashi Hatake mused as he put his boring book in his hip pouch. He blankly turned his one visible eye to address Guy, why not just rock paper scissors? The young Anbu spoke through his black mask. He was not really in the mood to play any games today. His sensei was expecting his son today. Minato-sensei, I can't wait to meet Naruto. I hope nothing goes wrong. His thought was cut off when he felt a breeze go through his gravity-defying silver hair and his shinobi sixth sense picked up on potential danger. No way. Damn it, Kakashi. Guy fumed, though he looked more shallow than genuine. Guy has been trying to help his friend recover from the trauma he suffered from the end of the war, but getting Kakashi out of his shell was harder than he thought. I propose we climb the Hokage mountain on our fingertips. Or race to the front gate without touching a horizontal surface. Or, the rest of Guy's declarations were interrupted by Kakashi shushing him. Guy, do you feel anything strange in the air tonight? The silver-haired teen questioned. Guy seemed to get dramatically offended by this attempted cop-out by his rival, but didn't say anything when he saw the worried look on Kakashi's face. Kakashi, Guy thought, but then turned serious looking for any threats. Meanwhile in the Uchiha compound, a 5-year-old Itachi Uchiha rocked his sister back and forth while on the back porch. Despite only being 5, Itachi was able to notice a hint of danger from the breeze just like Kakashi. His little sister whimpered slightly from air and slammed her big eyes shut in an attempt to get away from the odd feeling. Itachi held his sister closer after seeing this, of all the nights for Ka-san and Tu-san to be out. He mused too. himself as he continued to rock his sister. Shish, it's okay Satsuki-chan. No matter what, you big brother will always be there for you. Itachi reassured little Satsuki, as he continued to look up into the bright moonlight sky. At the Sarutobi compound, Hiruzen Sarutobi was practicing his calligraphy for Fuinjutsu, one of his favorite pastimes after his retirement as the Sandaime Hokage. He froze midway through a stroke on his brush. When he sensed a particular killing intent that he hadn't felt since his childhood, during the time of Hashirama Senju's reign as Shidaime Hokage. A killing NT that made him shiver despite being at the northern border of the Hai no Kuni more than 60 years ago. Impossible, he mumbled to himself. Did the seal break? It was only one thing. The Kyuubi no Yoko. A lone figure materialized down an alleyway near the center of the village. Dressed in a full black cloak, wearing a burnt orange mask with black markings around it, and only one hole displaying a blood-red eye surrounded by 3 black tomo, the Sharingan. Then he slammed his hand with as much chakra as he could push, as he only said 2 words, summoning jutsu. And then it began. Around the spot the man slammed his hand. A great explosion of smoke emerged, with such force around the jutsu that anything near the center was blown away, be it man or building. When the smoke finally dissipated, it revealed a demon with eyes as red as hell itself and hatred that killed the elderly just by its intensity. There it stood, with 9 tails, each individually capable of crushing mountains and causing tsunamis. Set its glowing eyes on the village below its feet. No way. A wide-eyed civilian managed to stutter out when he saw those eyes glaring into him. The residents of Konoha who had a clear view of the demon were either frozen in fear or rushing as fast as they could towards the evacuation center. They took in the sight of a monster they only heard of in nightmares and horror stories. The demon fox. Kyuubi. Quote, "Run for your lives." Those were the common calls throughout the night as the demon fox ran rampant. Back in the Sarutobi compound, the retired Sandaime was already dressed in his black battle attire, when an Anbu dropped down. Sandaime-sama, the Kyuubi has invaded Konoha. The commander quickly shouted. The elder Kage nodded when he put on his helmet. I know. Minato may be preoccupied. We need to start evaluation procedure. Get all civilians and shinobi under age of 16 to evacuation points. The third commanded as he thought of the next generation. We must protect the king of the village. Get all shinobi to lure the Kyuubi to outside the village wall. The Anbu gave a quick, hi, and flickered off to spread the news. Before Hiruzen had a chance to enter the battlefield, the sound of a wooden cane made him turn around. Hiruzen, a moment please. There stood a man with a bandaged eye and only one arm. A fellow student of Tobarama. Danzo. The Sandaime questioned impatiently. In the midst of all the destruction and terror, there was one noise that outvoiced the rest, Yosh. Now is the chance for me to release all my pent-up aggression. Guy shouted before making a pose in the direction of the Kyuubi no Yoko, your opponent is me. No, said a veteran Jonin who jumped in front of the 2 teens. Sandaime-sama orders all shinobi below 16 to evacuate. You are the next generation. Even if we fall you are still with us. The Jonin said before running off to his likely death. Guy stood dumbfounded. Hiruzen-sama, he was confused why all shinobi weren't expected to give their lives. Kakashi broke him from his musing. Guy, we have to go. Hokage's orders, Kakashi commanded. His rival noted, absent-mindedly, as they left. The tragic screams heard throughout the village and the futile efforts of the shinobi who were no match for the greatest of the 9 Biju, as all that could be seen and heard during the night. That was until He demon abruptly changed its attention towards the Hokage monument, more specifically the small figure on the top of the 4th head. Minato Namikaze had just finished returning his wife to their infant's side. He had decked in his Hokage attire, with a Jonin flak jacket over his all-blue outfit. On top of that was his white Hokage Haori with his title and red flames licking the bottom. The Kono, a headband displayed proudly on his forehead. He flashed to his marker on top of his stone face, where he knew he would get the Biju's attention. As Hokage, I will protect the village that is my family. That proved correct when the fox glared murderously at the blue-eyed Kage. So, you've noticed me, he said coolly. The Kyuubi began to open its mouth and produced a purple ball of chakra that was incredibly dense. One attack would be capable of turning Konoha into a crater. Minato began to run through hand signs. "Don't think I'll let you," he said calmly, finishing in the ram sign. When Kyuubi unleashed its signature Bijudama directly at the Yondaime, scraping the tops of buildings in its path. Before the ball could reach its target, it suddenly stopped. Hirishin, guiding thunder. Minato mentally called out as he summoned a gigantic seal array to trap the attack in a time-space dimension, before releasing the technique to a marker far away from the village. The after effects of the attack came brushing towards Konoha at a fast pace. Jikuken ninjutsu, time-space ninjutsu, called out a chubby man with red hair with a bow staff. This was Choza Akamichi, clan head of the Akamichi clan. He was looking up at the stone faces. "Is it Minato?" asked a hopeful man with a black ponytail and goatee. This was Nara clan head, Shikaku Nara. He looks almost identical to every other Nara, with the exception of two distinct scars on the right side of his face. A man with a blonde ponytail beside him nodded. This was Yamanaka clan head, Inoichi Yamanaka. The three shinobi together are known as the Ino-Shika Cho formation, due to their perfect teamwork with each member complementing the other. They were a crucial team during the Third Great Ninja War. The three are also great friends with Minato and Kushina. Though unaware of Kushina's previous status, they heard she was expecting soon, and wanted their kids to be friends, as they'd all be the same age. Back to Minato, he was currently recovering from the chakra drain the technique used, but before he had time to blink, he sensed a presence behind him, so he stabbed his tri-pronged kunai at the masked man behind it. But it simply phased straight through him. What is this technique? Minato's brain urgently began trying to decipher the jutsu, but the masked man gave him no chance. He grabbed Minato's arm tightly, and roughly announced, "I am your opponent, and you have lost." And with that, his right eye began to form a vacuum sucking Minato away, though before he could get caught, he used Hirishin to escape to an open field. "He's fast," the masked man muttered, before shrugging and teleporting himself to the same spot as Minato. The Yondaime Hokage got up and winced from his rough landing, when he saw a familiar vortex reveal the same hooded figure. Minato remained silent as he watched the man 20 feet ahead of him, but in his mind his brain was ticking. This man, he has the Sharingan, as well as a time-space ninjutsu that surpasses Nadaime-sama and myself, that he is able to get past the Sandaime's hand-picked Anbu, then through the barrier without alerting anyone. Then managed to separate me from Kushina and control the Kyuubi as well as summon it in Konoha. Minato thought back to the lessons he learned about the final valley. Only Madara was capable of such a feat, let's test him out. Minato stared his opponent dead in the eye. That's when Minato took the chance to ask, "Are you Uchiha Madara?" No, that's impossible. He's dead. The blonde quickly dismissed his theory but wanted to see the reaction to the name from the man. The masked man did flinch ever so slightly, but Minato saw it. He then took off his hood revealing spiky black hair. The man then shrugged. Who knows?" he rhetorically asked. Minato narrowed his eyes at the nonchalant reply. "Why have you attacked Konoha?" Minato demanded with an ice-cold glare that did unnerve the man under the mask. The man raised his cloaked arm to unveil a chain and replied, "You could say I did it on a whim, or that I planned it. But you wouldn't believe me, if I said I did it for peace." He lazily shrugged again as he connected the chains on both hands. Like a long handcuff. Blue eyes narrowed on the weapon. He seems to take advantage of the intangibility he possesses, and uses the chain to solidify and catch me in whatever jutsu I escaped on the stone face. His thoughts were cut off when he heard an explosion from the direction of Konoha. "I don't have enough time to build up nature energy, so senjutsu is out of the question. This battle is delicate, so opening the gates is ineffective, especially with the body strain using it. I still have to deal with the Kyuubi if I finish him, so I have to save my reserves as much as possible." Minato raised his specialized kunai and thought, "Let's test my theory out," and with that he ran straight towards the man who came just as fast. Minato held his kunai out, but as theorized, he simply went through the man. The masked man then yanked his arms after Minato went fully through him. Then Minato was caught in the chain, as expected. Minato thought before flashing to the marker before him. Minato closed his eyes for a second to concentrate, so he is capable of becoming intangible completely, but needs to fully solidify in order to touch me. That's why. He waited until I was all the way through him. Minato stood up to face his opponent who was pacing in place with his chains stretched out. Minato raised his kunai again. So this is a race to who gets the attack first. I only have a fraction of a second, he materializes. I need that hit first. Then they both sprinted at one another the same way as before, though this time, Minato flawless flicked his kunai through his opponent's masked head as they neared one another. The masked man didn't think much about the kunai but instead focused on grabbing hold of the Hokage. In his right hand, Minato summoned a dense, blue ball of chakra. And just as the ring of the kunai left the masked man's head, the orange masked man attempted to grab Minato, and confidently thought, I win. Though just before he got hold, the blonde man vanished. And before the masked man could react, he was met with an excruciating pain in his back when it was met with a powerful Rasengan. This is after Minato teleport. Ed to the kunai behind the man in the split second he solidified. Damn it. He teleported to the kunai he threw. That bastard. The masked man seethed in anger and pain from the attack, when he fell into a crater. Minato, still in midair, looked down on his enemy and calmly said, this is Hirishin, level 2. Unbeknownst to the masked man, Minato marked his back with a Hirishin tag. The man jumped away from Minato. As white goo traveled down his left arm, detaching his chain. He looked up at Minato who stood there unscathed. Impressive, Minato. I only let my guard down for a sec, the rest oh. The masked man's praise was cut off when Minato stabbed him in the stomach. The yellow flash saw the man still holding his arm, meaning he was solid, so he teleported to the marking on him and used. This is an opportunity to free the Kyuubi. Using his extensive Fuinjutsu knowledge, Minato used chakra on his palm to form a seal that would remove summoning control to anyone who is subjected to the seal. A seal array appeared on the masked man's chest, and he started panicking. A contract seal. You wish for me to lose the Kyuubi. Minato simply looked coldly into his eye. With this, the Kyuubi is no longer under your control. And back in Konoha, the 3 Tomo-possessed Kyuubi becomes free again. But now was his chance for vengeance against the village that trapped him like a slave for over half a century. So the Kyuubi continued to cause havoc in Konoha. Minato stared down the defeated opponent in front of him, and the masked man said, you may have won the battle, but the Kyuubi will be mine. He began to swirl out of existence as he left Minato with the parting words, one day, I will control this world. And with that, Minato was alone. I get the feeling he isn't lying. He thought with a frown. Before turning his attention to the last of his issues. Seems I have only one option left, Minato thought for the future, and was aware today would be the end of the road for him. But Naruto, this is something that I can only entrust you to fulfill. Succeed where I failed. Then the Yondaime flashed back to Konoha for the last time. When he arrived on the top of the Sandame's stone face. He panicked when he saw the demon pointing a half-complete Bijudama at the village after the Sandame used his adamantine staff to push the Kyuubi outside the village. He raced through hand signs again and called out. Summoning Jutsu, and Toad Boss, Gamabunta landed on top of the Kyuubi's head. Minato-sama. Yondaime-sama. Thank God. Those words were spread by all the shinobi on their last legs. Minato, Hiruzen called out, but Minato was too preoccupied with the Kyuubi and his last actions. Kushina, I'm sorry, Minato thought solemnly, as he knew his wife won't approve of his plan to make Naruto a Jinchuriki. Gamabunta, hold him down a little longer. Minato called out to his partner beneath him. Easier said than done, brat. I can do a few more seconds. The cage didn't respond as he jumped down to the fox building a large amount of chakra up, while the Kyuubi was about to unleash a Bijudama that would destroy the village. Just as the Biju closed its mouth, the other shinobi including Hiruzen tensed. Though before it had a chance, Minato teleported it and himself away from the village borders. All that was left was Gamabunta. Did Minato teleport the Kyuubi away? Sarutobi asked rhetorically, but where? Before he finished the thought, there was a loud explosion far away into the forest. Minato, Hiruzen said softly, worried about his young successor. As he raced towards the explosion. Minato was looking worse for wear right now. He just teleports a monster fox with infinite chakra and just about escaped getting caught in a Bijudama. Then teleported back to the safe house his wife and child was in and then teleported back to the recovering Biju. He put his wife down while holding the sleeping bundle in his hand. He was breathing very heavily. I'm almost entirely out of chakra, but I need to put up a barrier. The next moment he sees his wife shoot dozens of adamantine sealing chains to completely trap the Kyuubi, as well as using some of the chains to create a barrier around the area. Kushina, Minato shouts to his wife as she coughs up a mouthful of blood. Naruto, in his arms, also started wailing. By all logical explanations, she should be dead by now. Having given birth, Biju extraction, and now effectively chaining the beast that took the entirety of Konoha's military and the Sandaime to just get outside the walls. His wife truly was amazing. Minato, she said softly with a smile, it's all right, I'm going to take responsibility for my burden. Minato widened his eyes at her proclamation. No, Minato whispered as he understood that his wife was going to die. Kushina nodded slowly with a sad smile. Yes, I'm going to de-draw the Kyuubi into me and I. Kushina announced with blood running from down the side of her lips. That will delay its resurrection for, and now. I'll use all my chakra left to save you all. Kushina said with a smile, while staring at her now sleeping baby and husband. Minato remained silent, though the slight quiver in his lips showed he was close to breaking apart. Thank you for everything, Minato. Kushina quietly beamed at her husband. Minato was silent for a moment before replying. Kushina, Minato started. It is you I should be thanking. Kushina looked up at Minato with surprise. It's thanks to you, I am Hokage. You made me your man. You made me a father. Kushina smiled at her husband and nodded. I'm happy you loved me. Whenever I think of our future together as a family if I lived, I think of a life full of happiness. Minato gasped as silent tears fell down his eyes. Kushina took the tears as an opportunity to tease her husband. Don't get too emotional, girly man. Minato silently chuckled at the callback to his old nickname. But the atmosphere was still solemn. Little Naruto started to whimper at his mother, seemingly understanding the sadness of the situation. Kushina shakily rubbed Naruto's cheek lovingly. If there's one regret I have, it's that I won't be able to see Naru-chan grow up. She said with a sad smile of acceptance. That's when Minato made his decision, with more tears cascading down his cheeks. Use what little chakra you have left to ensure a reunion with Naruto. Kushina blinked in confusion at her husband, but soon enough she understood what he planned to do. Quote, it'll be part of the 8 trigram seal and I will take the Kyuubi with me. Minato asserted. But since I'm not a Jinchuriki, I'll use the only option I have left, the Reaper Death Seal. Kushina itted her teeth and looked wide-eyed at her husband. But that seal. Afterwards, you will be Dia, Minato cut her off with a hand up. Kushina started shaking, not only would her husband die, but her child would be an orphan. But Minato didn't stop there. Also, I will only seal away half the Kyuubi with me for eternity. The other half, Minato thought about the masked man and the threat he would prove to be. As well as Jiraiya sensei's prophecy. That's when Minato realized who he meant by the child of prophecy. The other half will be sealed away into Naruto, with the 8 trigram seal. Kushina gasped, but was unable to utter any words in her current state. Minato continued, there are 2 important things I learned today. 1. That masked man who attacked you will surely bring about chaos and destruction in the world. And 2. The one who will stop that man, Minato looked down at his son with a smile, will be our child. Minato said with the utmost confidence. This boy, Jiraiya sensei's godson, will clear the way for a future as a Jinchuriki. Minato proclaimed with pride at his son. I have faith in him. Minato closed his eyes and prepared his last jutsu. Snake, boar, ram, rabbit, dog, rat, bird, horse. Snake, and with a clap of his hands. Shiki Fujin, Reaper Death Seal. Behind Minato appeared the image of white-haired demon with horns, holding his arms out with a knife between its teeth. Minato's soul can be seen held behind him as well, as he continued to keep his hand clamped together. Though he was looking at Naruto. We have to believe in our child. Minato declared, before looking at a terrified Kushina. After I use the Shiki Fujin, I'll see the rest of your chakra into Naruto, I want you to be there to help him when he attempts to control the Kyuubi's power as a Jinchuriki." Kushina finally got back her voice and started to glare at her husband, "But he's our son," she shouted. "Which is why I don't want to put such a terrible burden on him." She continued to shout at Minato, who just looked down sadly at her. "And why the Reaper Death Seal? If it's just for me to see Naruto, even if just for a short while, there's no need for you to die." The redhead went on, before looking down at her sleeping son. "I want for you to live and stay by Naruto as he grows and for you to protect him. I don't get it. Is it to keep the balance of the Biju between the nation?" She started to brim with tears. "Why must Naruto be sacrificed? Why must you sacrifice yourself for me?" The violet-eyed began to spit out blood as she screamed. Minato allowed for her to let it all out. To forsake one's nation, and one's village, is the same as to forsake one's child. Minato replied calmly. "Your own homeland was destroyed, so you have people should know." Kushina looked down at the mention of Uzushiogakure, the hard life that awaits those without a country. "Beside, our family is shinobi." Kushina looked up at her husband, still breathing heavily. And Minato finished, "Besides, if I were to live, I'm no match to you." Kushina gasped quietly as Minato crouched up to her, "Even though you won't have much time with him. There are some things only his mother can tell Naruto, things I can't." Minato said with a smile. "That's a mother's role. Though I'm not just doing this for you, I'm doing this for Naruto." Minato picked up his snoozing infant. "I will gladly die for my son. That's a father's role." At the edge of the barrier was Hiruzen Sarutobi, as well as two of his Jonin. Hiruzen banged on the barrier but it wouldn't budge. It seems they are trying to deal with the Kyuubi themselves. He wasn't the professor for nothing, he could tell Minato would die after using this specific jutsu and he was angry with himself that Minato would have to give his life, when it should be his job to seal the Kyuubi away. He's still so young, he has a new family with Kushina-chan and Naruto-kun. He's too young to throw away his life for the village that still needs him. Hiruzen was aware the fallout after today would cause him to step back into the Hokage position before a suitable replacement was found. But that could take years. Hiruzen wasn't suited to take the hat again, he left because it was the right time. The village needed Minato more than anyone to help them through the aftermath. Who knows how long it will take to find the next Minato Namikaze. But he could not allow Danzo or one of his group to take control. Especially after my recent conversation with him. Hiruzen shook his head at the thought of his old friend rival. Helpless with his two Jonin, the Sandaime watched the inevitable happen. The Shinigami had enough waiting, so he placed his arm through Minato's soul, as an arm that latched onto the Kyuubi's fur. The Kyuubi who saw this knew what was happening. "Damn you, Yondaime Hokage." The restrained Kyuubi growled, but Minato paid no mind. "Fuin," shouted the blonde Kage, as the Shinigami pulled the yin half of the Kyuubi and sealed it into Minato's chest. Exclamation mark. Minato grunted in pain as he contained half of the fox's chakra. "My body is getting numb, I never expected such." A massive chakra. On Minato's chest was an 8 trigram seal with an Uzumaki swirl in the center. Unfortunately for the couple, with half the Kyuubi being sealed in Minato, the yang side is half the height. So Kushina's chains are now loose on the small Kyuubi. Minato summoned a sealing altar and placed Naruto inside to start the process. "I will now seal the Kyuubi inside Naruto." The Kyuubi saw what they were doing, the ritual altar. The demon questioned, and realized his fate. "Does he intend to seal me again?" Raising his voice inside his head, then spotted Naruto on the altar. Furthermore, inside that brat. Kushina started to fade into the darkness but began violently coughing up blood, losing slight control of chains. Minato panicked when he saw the state his wife was in. "Kushina." He started hobbling over to her. "Are you alright?" When Minato ran away from the altar to his wife, the Kyuubi took this chance, and began to lunge at the infant Naruto sleeping peacefully on the altar. "Right now." The Kyuubi roared as it brought its free hand towards the child, to claw him. Both Minato and Kushina widened their eyes as they pushed every last bit of chakra left to get to their child before the claw did. They do. Although, in order to save their baby son's life, they throw themselves onto the claw to stop the movement before it reaches Naruto. The claw stops inches from Naruto's stomach after they both put their feet in the dirt. There is merely a drop of his parents' combined blood that falls on his small chest. Both Minato and Kushina are pierced through their stom. ACH and they stand over their pride and joy. I said this was AF father's duty. Minato managed to stutter out. T then all the M more, since I'm his mother. Kushina cheekily retorted. Sarutobi watched from afar and saw an altar. There's a child. Then he saw a tuft of blonde hair on the altar. I see, so Minato-kun is making Naruto-kun into the Jinchuriki. They shielded him. The Jonin stated. Sarutobi watched on as this would be his successor to be predecessor's final words and moment. Kushina continued to smile, despite being pierced by her previous prisoner. This is the argument I've lost. Okay. I understand you are determined to do this. Minato smiled in gratitude at his wife in front of him. Thank you, Kushina, Minato said, before using the blonde on his chin to do a summoning jutsu. And out puffed a long toad. Ah Kyuubi. Yondaime too. What is the meaning of this? The toad, Garotora, demanded. Garotora. I'm going to give you, the sealing formulas K. Minato took a few more deep breaths, take it immediately to Jiraiya-sensei and store it away. The Yondaime commanded. The toad nodded and he collected the key onto the scroll from Minato. You have my word. I confirm the key is in my possession. Now I'm off. And then Garotora dispelled. Minato closed his eyes, that should do it. He looked forward at his wife, as the Shinigami started licking his knife. Kushina. He said softly, I'm running short on time, I will start the 8 trigram seal. I want to put some of my chakra into Naruto as well. It'll be a while before we see him again. He looked at his son. Let's tell him what we want to say. Kushina nodded and took a deep breath. Naruto. Don't be picky. Eat lots and grow strong. Make sure that you bathe every day and stay warm. Kushina started. Also. Don't stay up late. You need lots of sleep. And make friends. You don't need a lot of friends. Just a few. Ones you can really trust. Her voice quivered ever so slightly as she stared down at the one she would soon leave behind. I wasn't very good at it, but keep up with your studies and practice your ninjutsu hard. Remember that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. So don't get too depressed if you can't do something well. Respect your teachers and upperclassmen at the academy. Oh, and this is important. It's about the 3 prohibitions for a shinobi. Be extra careful about lending and borrowing money. Put your mission wages into your savings account. She continued. No alcohol until you're 20. Too much can ruin your health, so drink in moderation. Another prohibition is women. Her voice took quite a protective tone, Minato thought with amusement. I'm a woman, so I don't know too much about this but. All you need remember is that this world is made up of men and women. So it's only natural to take an interest in girls. But just don't get hooked on bad women. Find someone just like me. She closed her eyes with a smile. Speaking of the 3 prohibitions, be wary of Jiraiya-sensei, Ibane. Kushina and Minato both shared a cheeky smile at that remark. Naruto, Kushina's eyes began to water. From now on, you're going to face lots of pain and hardship. Be true to yourself. Have a dream and have the confidence to make that dream come true. There's so much. So much more that I want to pass on to you. I wish I could stay with you longer. I love you. Kushina couldn't stop crying at this point. Minato, I'm sorry. I've used up all your time. Minato just shook his head with a smile. It's fine, Minato whispered. Naruto, my advice as your father, and with a wink he said, well. I guess you nagging Ka-chan said it all. Then he looked between his silently crying wife and his peacefully sleeping infant. He closed his eyes one last time and whispered. 8 signs seal. And the Kyuubi no Yoko had a new Jinchuriki. The hat on Hiruzen Sarutobi's head felt 1,000 times heavier than the last time he wore it. Under 2 years ago. Not because of the weight, but the responsibility the hat came with. The old man feels himself aging at an alarming rate the last 2 weeks, with deeper wrinkles and progressively whiter hair. He thought back to the dreaded night of October 10th. When Konoha lost a large portion of the shinobi and civilians, including his beautiful wife, Bawako. And his late successor along with his wife, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. All that they left behind was their legacy, who currently resides in the Konoha orphanage. Naruto Uzumaki. The blonde eye. Enfant is the last survivor of their late family and Hiruzen will make sure is well looked after. Sarutobi thought back to his final meeting with Kushina, who was slowly dying next to her already deceased husband. Pete, please, look after OR's son, Kushina had pleaded to the old Kage. His name is Naruto. Hiruzen sighs at the memory. He had almost broken apart when he saw the cold body of his wife in the bunker. The kunai slash on her neck proves there was a third party involved that assisted in the extraction, and Hiruzen vows to find the person that killed his wife and destroyed his village. He grimaced at the thought of what he would tell the public. He decided to hide Naruto's heritage and his Jinchuriki status. He is just another boy at the orphanage, as he doesn't want Naruto to get the scapegoat treatment. Or any threats from his parents' enemies. Only his council of advisors Homaru, Kaharu, and Danzo know of his burden. Hiruzen had quickly glared at Danzo to silence the obvious request he had. Give me the boy. Other than them, only the two Jonin who arrived on the scene with him knew as well, though they had both sworn to secrecy. And of course, so does the man currently perched on the windowsill. Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin, master of the Yondaime, looks at his sensei with sad eyes. So, they're real gone. It was a rhetorical question, but the old man nods solemnly. I'm afraid so. All they left behind is Naruto-kun. The name of the Sannin's godson causes him to look up. How is the kid? Wanting to know about how the last of his family is doing. As well as any orphan can do. The reinstated Hokage replied coolly. He sighs when he sees a pleading look from his student. Look, Jiraiya-kun. He starts gently. I know how much you want to look after him, but right now, your information gathering is too important. The Sannin glares at his master, but the old man brushes it off. The attack puts us in a vulnerable situation. Iwa and Kumo could take advantage at any moment. You're the best person to check for external threats. Jiraiya looks away at his sensei's logic. Jiraiya never had any children, he made sure of that, but he always looked at Minato as one of his own. Being announced as his son's godfather was one of the best feelings Jiraiya had, especially after the name, Naruto, came from his first book. So he, not being able to look after Naruto due to the importance of his spy network, kills him inside. What about Makoto? Jiraiya reminds Hiruzen of his last living student, surely she would adopt Naruto. Jiraiya hadn't seen Makoto since Itachi was born. But they still had a good relationship. Hiruzen rubs his temples. I can't allow any clan to adopt Naruto-kun. Jiraiya frowns. As much as I hate to admit it, he is a military asset who can't be tied down to any clan. He will be fine in the orphanage. Jiraiya just stares at his sensei before sighing. Fine, sensei. I'll let you deal with the consequences. Jiraiya still looks sad at leaving his godson behind. He will be looked after well. Hiruzen firmly states, attracting Jiraiya's attention, we also have to find the person who attacked Kushina. His old eyes darken at the reminder. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at his sensei, so he reiterates. Someone knew about the Jinchuriki's childbirth weakness, if the non-Kyuubi-like deaths of Taji and Bibai. Wako-chan or any indication, his master growls, but weakens at the mention of his wife. Jiraiya widened his eyes at the information, before dangerously narrowing them. He thought it was merely a sealing accident. But to hear there is a third party involved makes it a whole new story. Are there any suspicions? Jiraiya couldn't help but ask. His sensei sighs for the umpteenth time. No concrete cases. Danzo is suspicious of the Uchiha. Already assigned for them to be relocated to the village outskirts between Anbu surveillance towers. The Toad Sage widened his eyes at that. What? He shouts. I know Tobarama-sama told you to be wary of them, but only Madara could control Kyuubi. We have no shinobi with visual prowess of that level. Jiraiya couldn't believe his sensei could allow that old warhawk to make such a bold move. Why didn't you stop him? He interrogates the tired Hokage, whose wrinkles deepened even more. All the other clans approved of their moves, and the advisors rubber-stamped Danzo's plan. Only Fugaku raised concerns. What do you expect? That he would welcome being treated like a criminal before any case? Jiraiya sarcastically remarks. Hiruzen glares at him. Don't scorn me, Jiraiya. He said firmly. Fugaku agreed to the move. All should be alright. Jiraiya snorts at his sensei's naivety, a thing not unnoticed by him. If you want to, Jiraiya-kun, you can take this hat from me. You can fix all the mistakes, while looking after your godson. Hiruzen mocked, but both knew he was dead serious. This time, Jiraiya couldn't hold in the laughter from exploding, ha ha ha. Gee, good one, sensei. Anyway, I'm going to check if the hot springs are repaired. A large perverted grin appeared on his face, stretching the red lines that go down his eyes. Maybe I could have a change of book genres. Since adventure isn't really selling. The sage giggled to himself. Sarutobi shakes his head at the antics, his student was probably too horny to be Hokage. Also, gee, Raya started when walking back to the window, fill Kakashi in on Naruto. Maybe guarding the brat will stop him going on suicide missions. Hiruzen nods at that, it is a good plan. Good idea, have fun, Jiraiya-kun. Jiraiya just waved back before body flicking back out the window. The professor leans back in his chair and sighs in tiredness. I need to get back to work. The Sandaime returns to R. Eating damage reports and writing to request aid from their allies. When about an hour into it, there was a knock on the door. He grunts again, come in. He said in a loud, rough voice. He looked up at the door and saw a black-haired woman walk in. She still had quite red, puffy eyes. The old man smiles warmly at the woman, Makoto-chan. What can I help you with today? Hiruzen already has an idea of what this was about. Sandaime-sama, Makoto bowed, I haven't had a chance to come to you since the funeral service. My condolences for Bawako-sama. She mournfully said to Hiruzen, who smiled sadly in response. Thank you, Makoto-chan, I can say the same about Kushina-chan and Minato-kun. We have all lost great friends on that day, and we will deeply miss them all. Makoto solemnly nods in agreement with the Hokage. Speaking of Kushina and Minato, I would like to request to adopt Naruto-kun. I am aware that Jiraiya-sensei would be his legal guardian, but I don't expect him to be around to look after him. Makoto said, thinking about her old sensei from her genin days and his lack of parenting skills. Hiruzen was blank-faced on the surface, but he was running through his current dilemma in his head. As much as I would love for Naruto-kun to grow up in a family, the council would rather surrender to Iwa than allow the Uchiha clan to adopt our Jinchuriki. Hiruzen hates that He has to treat Naruto like a military asset, but in reality, he is. There are already signs of mistrust coming back towards the Uchiha, and if Naruto's status is ever exposed, it would cause both Naruto and the Uchiha to suffer even more. Single quote. The Sandaime looked up towards the patient, young woman before him as he continued to think. Also, if Minato and Kushina's best friend adopted their son, his heritage would most likely be discovered. This would cause risk of assassins coming in for petty revenge. He internally sighed, but I know how persistent Makoto is. She will stop at nothing to meet Naruto in any way. And when I say, no, then it was look like I mistrust the Uchiha with the son of the Yondaime, damn it. This was a lose-lose situation. Hiruzen had a perilous thought, if Naruto is hidden from the spotlight for his early years, it will allow him to think for himself, rather than tie himself down to any clan. He really despised thinking of Naruto as a weapon. If no one but the top officials know about him, he could be safe from unnecessary attention. I'm sorry about this, Makoto. The Sandaime turned solemnly and makes his risky move. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Makoto blinks in surprise, but is internally worried. The boy, unfortunately, passed away along with his parents. Hiruzen mournfully fibbed. Makoto gasps in horror, with wide eyes. What? She managed to stutter out. Hiruzen closed his eyes and nodded slowly. The killing intent of the Kyuubi was merely too much for a newborn. I'm sorry, Makoto-chan. If her Sharingan was active, she may have read through the lie. But Sarutobi's experience with Kagami Uchiha could have allowed him to outsmart the Sharingan. The Uchiha in question dropped to her knees as her hands shook, and not just them, but Naruto too. Tears started to fall from her eyes, as she shakily stood up and walked to the door. By you leave, Sandaime-sama. Hiruzen nodded once again and after another bow, the Uchiha left. Hiruzen collapsed back in his chair again, while rubbing his throbbing temples. This is really going to bite me in the ass, he mumbled quietly. Maybe when the Uchiha situation settles down, I can allow it. He didn't know how long that would take though. That would be the first of many mistakes Hiruzen made in his second tenure as Hokage. 5 years later, the door of an old apartment creaked open. In walked a small boy looking downward with big, sad, blue eyes. I'm home, he mumbled sadly to himself, as he flops onto his squeaky bed. His spiky blonde hair swaying in the breeze, as he looks up at the ceiling. This was Naruto Uzumaki, pariah of Konoha. Ever since he could remember, he has been looked down on by the citizens and shinobi of the village, children kept away from him by their parents. Hurtful whispers behind his back when they thought he couldn't hear, glares that essentially said, "How dare you show yourself," and people avoiding him as if he doesn't exist. Unbeknownst to the young blonde, there had been a leak about his status as the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, 2 years ago. The leak was suspected to be from an advisor of the Sandaime, in an attempt to undermine the Hokage for allowing such a dangerous thing in the village. It isn't that the people hurt the boy. He is simply a reminder of the pain on October 10, 5 years ago. As well as the uncertainty that surrounded him. How could they trust a simple child to hold the might of the Kyuubi? The people don't exactly despise him, they fear him. There have been stories from other villages like Kumo and Suna, where their Biju breaks free and attacks the village. There are rumors passing around that the demon fox is poisoning his mind and gradually controlling Naruto. Though what they seemed ignorant about is that they aren't directing their hatred towards the demon within him, but at the boy himself. Despite their love and worship for the Yondaime, the citizens don't seem to trust the man's last act and sealing as Hokage. They even went so far as to spit on the last wish of Minato, that the Sandaime revealed for the boy to be treated like a hero. That was denied, as they would always display their distaste for the boy. He can only remember 4 people being nice to him and treating him with kindness. The matron at the orphanage before he left a year ago. Naruto seemingly grew on her. And she didn't see him as anything but a suffering child. That old man who ate fish with him at that campfire by the lake, and told him cool stories. Only in the last few months did Naruto realize that he was the man on the third big face of that mountain. He would come back to give him an allowance for rent and monthly expenses, but with the refusal to serve him at a lot of stores and restaurants. Or the super expensive prices for basic needs, he would run out of it quickly. The other 2 people that are nice to him is that ramen shop owner and his pretty daughter. He would call him Chuke. Ijichan and his daughter Ayame Nichan. They seemed to appreciate it, Ayame even hugged him. He first went to Ichiraku Ramen last year after wimping out of going in before, in fear he will be kicked out like the other stores. But when Chuki Jichan ushered him in during a rainy night and gave him a towel to dry off as well as a large bowl of miso ramen, he was instantly addicted to the food of gods. He never knew how good a warm-cooked meal was. He would go there more days to eat, or would buy the cheap instant ramen at the store, even if the prices were inflated. Naruto would sometimes find small gifts for him on his doorstep from time to time, including a long, red scarf, a pair of green goggles, and a frog wallet. He renamed it Gama-chan. Back to the bedroom, Naruto allows a few tears to run down his whiskered cheeks. "Why?" he whispers, sniffling, "Why am I all alone?" Naruto hates crying or showing any sign of discomfort. Whenever he was out in public, even if he is glared and sneered at, he would put on a grin that would reach his eyes, and do whatever he could to get attention from the public, be it bad or good. It would mostly be bad, as he has started to use his NT meant that he keeps locked away and turns it on the villagers in the form of nonviolent pranks. Simple pranks like painting stores, TPing the streets with toilet paper, and activities along those lines. Little things that would get him scolded or yelled at. Naruto would rather be hated outright than ignored like he was invisible. Which is one of the reasons Naruto is afraid of ghosts. But after the high of committing mischief, he would always look around and see the kids hugging with their mothers, or the fathers patting them on the head. It almost seemed like they were trying to show they were superior to him and say, "We have someone, you don't." After seeing these warm interactions, Naruto's chest would painfully tighten in longing. Why was it just him? What did he do to deserve this treatment? Does anybody care about him? These depressing thoughts would ring around his head as he walked back to his cruddy apartment building, ignoring the usual stares pointed his way. He doesn't want much. He just wants a mom and dad. The next day, Naruto woke up at noon to the sound of knocking at the door. As he hops over there, cautiously looks through the eye hole and saw a familiar attire. He yanks open the door. "Old man," Naruto shouts with joy. He was always happy to see the old man, who smiled softly back at the son of his late successor. "Good afternoon, Naruto-kun." Naruto blinked at that. He wasn't very good at counting at this point, but he knew that afternoon is when the clock is after 12. Then he pales. It's already lunchtime." Hiruzen chuckled at the boy's antics. Naruto reminded him a lot of Kushina, despite looking like Minato. He was one of the few positives in the old Kage's later years. When he found out Naruto's status leaked, he abruptly placed that it was forbidden to mention the Jinchuriki status in public or to the next generation. This would lead to the hopes that Naruto could make friends without their parents' prejudice, but it was tough as the parents would tell their kids he is a bad influence. He didn't get a chance to introduce himself into Naruto life for the first 3 years due to the ongoing recovery of the village, and he had a few excuses. One excuse was the problem he was facing with the Uchiha clan, whose relation with the village was fast declining, but he had faith in top shinobi like Shisui Uchiha and the up-and-coming Itachi Uchiha, who were potential legends in the Hidden Leaf. He couldn't afford to screw up with another clan, especially after the Hyuga incident last year. Another issue was the defection of his prized pupil, Orochimaru, who he couldn't bring himself to kill, giving him time to escape the village after conducting illegal experiments. The snake Sannin has been under the radar for the last year since he left, but is still a potential threat. Jiraiya is focused on finding his old teammate. Keeping Danzo under control was another task in itself. Despite how crucial Danzo has been in the rebuild of the village for the past few years, that man has too much power and influence that he can get away with many things, but he needs to be put on a leash. Ending his musing, he faced the panicking blonde and chuckled lightly. "It's all right, Naruto-kun." This caused the boy to relax. "Now, what is it you wanted to do? It's rare for you to send a letter to my office." He told Naruto to leave a letter on his doormat if he ever wanted to ask him something. In actuality, an Anbu would pick it up when they did a sweep of the area. Naruto slightly blushed. Well, I wanted to practice my handwriting," he said bashfully. And Hiruzen smiles down at the boy. He didn't exactly have the best grammar with his letter, Jichin Cmeaprtmnttmorw noon. But he's only 5 years old. Surprisingly, despite his bad spelling and grammar, he had an almost perfect penmanship. Maybe a future sealmaster. Hiruzen patted the shy boy's head, making him pout in response. Despite Naruto's overconfident and boastful nature, he can be quite timid at times, though the lack of attention may be responsible for that. Naruto shook off the pout and the blush and stared with shining eyes at the village leader. "Oh right, I want to go eat at Ichiraku with you." Hiruzen's eyes widened for a moment, but Naruto didn't notice. They have the best food in the world. Naruto counted on his fingers: miso ramen, tonkatsu ramen, oh. And don't forget shio ramen. Man, I'm getting hungry thinking about it, Datbeo. His stomach rumbled as he finished, and his cheek lit up again in embarrassment. Hiruzen chuckled again as he guides the boy to the door. Of course, Naruto beams up at the old man as he continued, "It's been a while since I've gone to Ichiraku." The two walked down the stairs of the apartment complex, but before going on the main road, Naruto stopped him. "Seiji-chan, this is the first time we're walking out in public together." Naruto looked down bashfully. "Are you sure it's alright? You might get yelled at for being seen with me." Obviously Naruto was self-conscious about himself being treated as an outcast. Hiruzen smiled and ruffles Naruto's head gently. "There's nothing to worry about, Naruto." He crouched down to the boy's level. "Just focus on yourself and me. I don't judge you, do I?" Naruto shook his head frantically at the rhetorical question, so Hiruzen nodded. "Then there's no problem." Hiruzen has been quite angry about how the people of the village treat Naruto, even when he said Minato wants for Naruto to be seen as a hero, but he believes the blonde can change the public's opinion on him. The two began to walk down the street, and to the utter surprise of Naruto, no one was glaring at him. In fact, it seemed that people were looking at him with respect and bowing to him. Then it hit him. The old man was the one getting all the love. How did he get their respect? Naruto wonders. "Come on, Naruto-kun," the professor ushered him to follow. "We can get there before rush hour." Naruto nods seriously as he ran up to the old man, even if he doesn't know what rush hour is. They continued walking, while Naruto starts to bask in the acceptance he is witnessing when walking beside the old man. While Hiruzen simply nods back to those who bow to him. His mind was thinking other things. Thank God the Uchiha compound is on the other side of the village, there'd be he. LL to pay if Makoto-chan saw me with a mini Minato with Kushina's personality. He thought in sad amusement. After 5 years, he still hasn't told anyone else about Naruto's heritage, with the exception of Kakashi, who is guarding the boy to help prevent the teenager from having as much survivor guilt after Team Minato's demise. Kakashi-kun is quite overprotective with Naruto-kun. There haven't been any attempts for Naruto's life, internally nor externally, but Kakashi doesn't want to lose his sensei's son and requested to train him when he grows up. Kakashi has now returned to standard Anbu work, and is opening up to his comrade again. Thinking back to hiding Naruto's heritage, he was slightly relieved he didn't have Naruto adopted into the Uchiha clan. With the isolation the clan is undergoing, it's rare to see non-MPF members, military police force, of the clan out in the center of the village. The walls around the compound are more than for show. Hiruzen glances down at the one. Drouse Naruto. I already suspect Shikaku knows Naruto's identity, but he never confirmed it with me. That means Shuza and Inoichi, as well as all their wives know. Shikaku is far too smart for his own good. But at least he has the awareness to keep it secret within his group. When Naruto's status was released, his name got lost in the rumor mill, and simply went to Blonde, Whiskers, Kyuubi, and that was all the villagers needed to know. They had their scapegoat. So it was somewhat lucky the Uzumaki name went missing in the rumors, as it may attract some unwanted attention from abroad. Zen's musing was cut off when Naruto ran ahead of him and cheered happily, "We're here, Ttebeo." Hiruzen smiled as he ducked up the familiar curtains to enter the ramen stand. Ichiraku ramen, it always comes back to you. Hiruzen recalls the memories in this stand that he had with Minato, Bawako, Kushina, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Asuma, and recently, Ruruka. "Hey, Tsukiji-chan," said man looked at the entering duo and smiles warmly. "Welcome Naruto-kun. Hokage-sama. What can I do for ya?" Tsuki greets, as his 10-year-old daughter, Ayame, waves at them with a smile. "Good afternoon Tsuki-kun, I'll have a bowl of miso please." And Naruto. Hiruzen stares down at the boy sitting beside him, who is squinting his nose up in concentration. After a minute of patient contemplation, he nods and declares with a foxy grin. "I'll have the same." Everyone face-faulted, even Ayame, at Naruto's overdramatic proclamation. As the ramen was being made, the two sat in comfortable silence. Until Naruto tapped on Hiruzen's arm. Ji-chan. Naruto asks, looking curious. "Yes Naruto-kun," already slightly aware of what the boy will ask. "When we were walking down the street. Why did everyone look at you like that?" Naruto stares up with big blue eyes, wanting to know the big secret. "Well that's because I am the Hokage, Naruto-kun," Hiruzen replied, simply. Hokage. Naruto managed to piece the new word together. The Sandaime nodded. The boy's eyes widen. "Is that why your face is on that big rock?" Hiruzen chuckles at his naivety and smiles. "Yes, Naruto-kun, that is the Hokage mountain." Naruto's eyes begin to sparkle. All 4 of the Hokage, and the future Hokages, faces are displayed on the mountainside to watch over the village. "Wow," Naruto whispered in awe. Before looking panicky. But what happens when they run out of rock?" Naruto asks urgently. The Hokage blinked at the question before humming, "Good question. I'm sure we'll think of something, but that will be in the far future." Naruto nods while looking up to the mountain with respect. "They all look so strong and powerful," Naruto compliments, despite his struggle with tough words. Hiruzen nod. Dian looks a little proud at Naruto's comment. That all came crashing down with his next comment though. "Why do you look so old and weak now?" Naruto asks innocently. The old man quickly gets depressed. He could have sworn he heard Tsuki snickered behind the counter, that stopped when he mumbled, "There goes your tip." "Well Naruto-kun, when people get older, they tend to get a little weaker and more gray." He looked down to see Naruto pale and shiver. "Don't worry Naruto-kun, that's only after you grow up. You still have to get big and strong before you become like me," he laughed in reassurance. Naruto sighs in relief at that. erasing the mental image of a wrinkly, gray, 5-year-old Naruto. But Jichin, you're the third head. Where are the others? Hiruzen smiled solemnly. He had very good relationships with his 3 fellow fire shadows. They all passed on. Naruto. The boy tilted his head in confusion. Passed on. He wonders what passing something had to do with it. Hiruzen rephrased, they all died. Naruto-kun, his azure eyes widened in shock. What? The concept of death wasn't even a thought in his mind. Hiruzen inclines his head slightly. That's one of the risks of the job. Our responsibility is the village, even if it costs us our life. He still has regrets about the Kyuubi attack. Naruto seems to consider this quietly for a moment, before abruptly jumping on his chair, startling the old Kage. Okay, I have a new dream. Before staring, with determined blue eyes, at the curious man beside him. I'm going to become Hokage. And get the village to acknowledge me, Datbeo. Hiruzen's eyes widened at the bold proclamation. He could have sworn he saw an image of a blonde and a redhead behind the boy just then. He broke out of his thoughts before smiling at the boy. Well then, I wish you good luck. Naruto beamed and nods his head frantically. The two went back to eating their ramen. Naruto idly talks about all kinds of topics, while Hiruzen's mind is plagued by one thought. Must run in the family. Naruto was lying down at his favorite spot in the village, the stone head of the Yondaime. For the last 2 years, whenever he would feel lonely and helpless, he would always relax on the sculpture's spiky hair and watch the village from above. It made him feel big and strong, being about to look down at the village without receiving a glare in return. The stone head also seemed to give him a warm sense of comfort. After finding out about the Hokages, he had quickly decided the 4th was the best, and that is who he would work to surpass. It had been 6 months since Naruto declared his new dream to Hiruzen, but he was beginning to realize that getting acknowledged was easier said than done. He still pranked people like no tomorrow, but was beginning to get caught by Chunin and police force members around the town. They wouldn't arrest him, simply scold him and lecture him to stop being a nuisance. What they didn't know was that Naruto loved being scolded. It at least showed that he wasn't being ignored. The 5-year-old looked down at the village again before jumping onto a big spike of hair. He threw his arms to the side and with a massive grin. He shouted down to the village, I'm gonna be Hokage, you better believe it. The boy turned around to jump into the woods to get some training done. The old man said he would join the academy in a year. So he had to get ready to start his journey. Hopefully he wouldn't be ignored at the academy as well. Speaking of Hiruzen, he hadn't seen the old man in over 3 months to get ramen. He would still come to his apartment to deliver his monthly allowance, but there weren't many words exchanged. This was down to Naruto asking about his parents and Hiruzen merely brushed his question away. Naruto could tell that Sarutobi did know something about his parents but he was hiding it from him. He could also tell the old man knew why he got glared at, but he was denied an answer on both questions. This has caused their relationship to sour quite a bit. Hiruzen was also very busy with the village, but that was beside the point. Seated in his office was Hiruzen Sarutobi, who was now entirely white-haired. The pressure he was suffering from the current situation was getting him stressed. Sitting in front of him were his 3 advisors, Kaharu Uditane, Homura Mitokado, and Danzo Shimura. All 4 of them were taught by the Nadaime Hokage, Tobirama Senju. They even witnessed his last sacrifice, being the decoy for the Kinkaku force after the failed coup d'état in a meeting in Kumo between the Nadaime Raikage and Tobirama. This was one of the last acts of the First Great Ninja War as he passed the torch to 22-year-old Hiruzen to be the Sandaime. Tobirama was the Hokage, responsible for maintaining the village's strength directly after its foundation. With the death of his elder brother, Hashirama, to illness, the village lost a lot of stability. Tobirama introduced the Ninja Academy, founded the Uchiha police force, created the Chunin exams, and many other responsibilities that would boast the village's strength for the future generations. Despite Tobirama's love and devotion for all the village, his experience during the warring era gave him a massive prejudice towards the Uchiha clan, as they killed most of his family, little brothers included, and the meant ally instability that came with their bloodline. That prejudice was passed down to his last surviving students bar Hiruzen, which is what this meeting was about. For the last time Danzo. Hiruzen lazily rubbed his throbbing temple. He is 10 years old boy. You can't expect me to throw a child into the depths of Anbu. Hiruzen grumbled to his one-time friend. Danzo scoffed, Hiruzen, the boy is a prodigy like we've never seen before. To not take advantage would be ludicrous. The cripple was always resentful towards Hiruzen after he was picked as Hokage over him by the man he admires most, Tobirama-sensei. The boy is still too young to be moved into that division, allowing him to grow in the light will benefit his future. He just got promoted to Chunin. Danzo shook his head, you're too soft, Hiruzen. Said man narrowed his eyes, but Danzo continued, we were training at his age to battle for our clans. We are tools for a village now, used to fulfill a purpose, and Itachi has his purpose in the dark, in Anbu. You said it yourself. Itachi has been thinking like a Hokage since the age of 7. Hiruzen glared daggers at the one-eye man, as the other occupants merely watched the argument. Hashirama-sama created this village system to stop children going to war at a young age. You're pushing a warring-era ideology into the village system. Danzo remained unfazed. And you're correct. Itachi-kun does think like a Hokage, and I would very much like for him to remain under my command, not seeing all the horrors of the shinobi world so early on in his life. Hiruzen got up to look out the window, overlooking the village. You know they can't be trusted, Hiruzen. He froze. The Sandaime turned with darkened eyes towards his rival, who continued to speak, the Uchiha have something going on. We can't allow them to threaten the safety of the village. Hiruzen slammed his hands on the desk, startling his advisors, apart from Danzo. Hiruzen snarled at Danzo, how dare you? The Uchiha clan have been loyal to this village since its formation. Do you forget about the sacrifice Kagami made to save your life? The power he gifted you. Danzo subconsciously touched his bandaged eye. Kagami Uchiha was another student of Tobirama. Despite his prejudice, Tobirama respected Kagami more than most shinobi, due to his resistance in giving into the Uchiha's curse of hatred. Rama's fear of Madara was so great that he extensively studied the anatomy of an Uchiha and how their love turns into hate by great loss. During the midst of the Second Great Ninja War, there was a battle between Danzo Shimaru, Kagami Uchiha, and Tsukumo Hatake against Iwagakure's Yonbi Jinchuriki, Yomoshi. The battle raged on, and when Danzo, who lost his right eye, was killed by Yomoshi using lava chakra mode. Kagami used a forbidden Mangekyo Sharingan technique called Izanagi, which changed reality to save Danzo but blinded his left eye and drained his last remaining chakra. He gifted his remaining right eye to Danzo before he passed away, who used the power with Tsukumo to kill Yomoshi. Danzo remained in thought. When Kaharu went to relieve the tension, Hiruzen, you know very well we loved Kagami-kun as much as you. But you must recognize that Kagami-kun was the exception. Hiruzen looked at his only female teammate. As she went on, even Kagami-kun told us that the power that came with the Sharingan will cause more harm than good. It needs to be kept in check or the balance of power in the village will become rocky. Homaru stepped in. The Sharingan may be the strongest Kekkei Genkei bar Mokuten. But memorizing every trauma you've seen before your eyes is bound to make someone unstable. It's the blood as well. Danzo ended his silence, looking up at the Hokage. The feeling of love being taken away fuels an even greater hatred. Only the Uchiha strengthened from the emotion of loss and hatred. All eyes looked at him. It's obvious the citizens are afraid of them. Hiruzen rhetorically questioned. So you think it is wise to isolate this clan of hatred, and keep them surveilled? Danzo took a deep breath. The speculation of their involvement in the Kyuubi attack is still under investigation. Hiruzen glared, but Danzo ignored him. The eyewitnesses stated that they could see the tomos in the demon's eyes. Then why did you request for me to keep the Uchiha away from the battlefield? You asked me that before any eyewitnesses could have made that sighting. The Hokage raised his voice at Danzo's excuse. That was before it was all clear. Hiruzen's eyes widened in realization. You're afraid of Fugaku, aren't you? Danzo froze. The Hokage clenched his teeth together, seeing it all make sense. You were afraid of his feats in the war and kept them hidden from the public. So he wouldn't be Hokage candidate. The eyes of the cage narrowed dangerously. And you fear his visual prowess so much that you refuse to allow him to stop the beast, in fear of him using it for his own good. The cage abruptly stood up, his dense chakra blasting around the room in fury. Thousands of lives could have been saved if Fugaku used his eyes. Yet you question his loyalty and allow the segregation of his people. You're a disgrace. That was it for Danzo, who also jumped up and equaled Hiruzen's chakra output. Kaharu and Homaru started sweating heavily, and could no longer breathe properly as the windows began to crack. The clashing chakra coming off the old rivals was enough to make any non-seasoned shinobi shit themselves. Coming from the peace-loving Hokage. You sure like to shift your responsibilities onto others, Hiruzen. Sarutobi widened his eyes when Danzo shouted, but the furious cripple continued. It's always other, Hiruzen. You allowed for the Uchiha to be segregated. You let Kumo walk all over us when they attempted to steal our bloodline. You allowed Orochimaru to walk out of the village after backing out of confronting him, because you're weak. You refused to use the power of our Jinchuriki, who is a pure Uzumaki and has Namikaze blood running through his veins. You keep delaying talks with the Uchiha, allowing them to scheme behind our backs. Danzo proceeded to rip into the frozen Hokage. Face it, you have lost your strength, in power and mind. You are weak. And with that, Danzo used his cane to angrily limp towards the door. Hiruzen remained jaw-slackened with wide eyes, but then darkly whispered, I should have had you arrested when you attempted to murder me. Danzo merely snorted and kept walking to the door. I know, yet another soft mistake. Hiruzen shook ever so slightly at the reminder of his incompetence, but Danzo turned around to have the last words. The village is the great tree, the Uchiha are attempting to branch off, poisoning the tree in the process. His single eye narrowed at Sarutobi. Then it is the root's job to deal with the threat. He went to close the door. The Anbu is mine, and Itachi will be joining. And he left. Hiruzen slumped back into his seat. He felt older now than ever before. He should be in Shinigami's stomach, while Minato should be striving here with his family. A sore Naruto waddled back to his apartment. He just finished practicing some kicks he saw a Chunin do in the training ground. He went for a run around the woods near the east wall of the village, in an area he found about a month ago. It was a secluded region that had a beautiful, tall, natural waterfall coming into a wide, light blue swimming hole, wonderful green grass and trees surrounding the cove. Bushes and trees filled with various fruits, loads of native flowers that grow in the land of fire, as well as species of friendly animals that would let Naruto stroke them. The best part was that it was so tucked away and sequestered, it was hidden from the public, and Naruto decided to make it his own. He called it, the Uzu Cove. What Naruto and anybody still alive didn't know, was that Uzu Cove was originally a small training area for the Shidaime Hokage, Hashirama Senju. After the founding of Konoha, he would form vast forests that would surround the village. He picked here as a place to work on his skills, so he wouldn't get rusty while being the Hokage. The location of the Uzu Cove was actually where he would master his sage mode and learn to sync it with his bloodline, Mokuten. It was the ideal place for the late Hokage, as it was a sheltered area full of pure nature that allowed him to concentrate and meditate, away from any distractions. Not even Tobirama knew about it. While Hashirama learned his senjutsu in Shikatsu Forest, the cove is where he connected with nature outside of the Shikatsu Forest's natural climate, getting his sagehood battle ready. The skill was crucial for his final battle against Madara. What attracted Naruto to the areas was actually the traces of nature energy that remain in the wildlife around there. The blonde could subconsciously sense the nature energy in the air, and this led him towards the Uzu Cove, which seemingly gave him a safe haven. Naruto grinned as he thought about the Uzu Cove, excited to visit and train tomorrow. Getting back to his apartment, he went straight to bed and slept peacefully with a small smile on his face, allowing a tear to fall down his cheek as he dreamt about himself wearing the Hokage hat and two silhouettes hugging him, proudly saying, "Congratulations, son." Naruto whimpered as he woke up. He shivered from the cold feeling of loneliness. Even if it was just a dream, being able to receive any kind of love was worth it. But when he wakes up, it shows Naruto how alone he truly is. Even if the old man comes around from time to time to give him money, he would do the same for other orphans. Ichiraku was a business. They would have helped any other starving child. Maybe they didn't know he was hated. The point was, Naruto wasn't special. He was just a boy who got hated or pitied, not belonging to anyone or anywhere. While he thought this, he couldn't stop the tears from flowing down his eyes, or the snot pouring down his nose, or the shaking of his small fragile frame, or the tightness that pulled painfully in his chest, or the wails that came out his throat. So Naruto placed his head in his knees, his tiny hand tightly around his legs, as he attempted to cry his pain away. Key word: attempted. He left his apartment at mid-afternoon, with a face set out in an ear-to-ear grin, though you could clearly see the dry tear marks down his cheeks, and his bright, blue eyes with red around them from rubbing too hard. Naruto needed to do something. He hated to sit still. Sitting still gave him time to think about how lonely he was. Naruto needed a hobby. With his time in the Uzu Cove, he has developed a love for gardening. The many species of plants, the thought of creating and preserving life gave him a responsibility. He also loved the pretty flowers afterwards. Maybe when he was older, he could grow some plants in his apartment. The place was always too dark and some life could make it feel better. As Naruto walked down the street, treated to the similar reception of his presence, he tried ignoring them as he looked around for something to do. Pranking was fun, but it was expensive to get lots of paint, unless he stole it. But he didn't want to get scolded by the Hokage again. While getting scolded was good as it would get him attention, the old man gave him attention anyway. Also apparently it was illeg something. The streets were relatively quiet as Naruto got through them. Still no luck in finding anything after 2 hours of searching. There was to be something. The blonde mentally pleaded, while pouting. He was about to throw in the towel, when he overheard a pair of Chunin talking. Hey Inzu. Guess what finally came through? A Chunin boy with spiky, purple hair talked to his friend Inzu, as he pulled out a scroll. Naruto watched from afar. The brown-haired Inzu gasped, no way. The double-sided kunai came, Denko. Denko grinned smugly and used chakra to release the sealing scroll, and out poofed a kunai with 2 ends, with a handle in the middle. Yep. Denko smirked. As he threw the scroll in the trash, pocketing the kunai, let's go test it out. Inzu nodded and the two shunshined away. Naruto watched the whole encounter with wide eyes and mouth agape. He couldn't care less about the kunai, in fact the design looked stupid. He was more focused on the trash can, and the scroll in it. He ran over to it and pulled the scroll out. On it was a bunch of squiggly lines. How did he do that? Naruto whispered to himself in awe. Naruto found his new hobby. In the month that followed, Naruto did something he never did before. Read. He kae a temporary truce with the Hokage and ran into his office to ask him about the scroll. When he found out it was Fuinjutsu, he pleaded with the old man to give him some way to learn how to do it, intentionally causing all the Anbu hidden in the room to nearly have heart attacks. A 5-year-old Jinchuriki learning Fuinjutsu was a scary thought. But Naruto pleaded and said he'd stop asking about his parents. Hiruzen reluctantly allowed him, but only if he focused on reading and calligraphy practice, and he had to keep the Hokage updated on his progress, to which Naruto frantically nodded in acceptance. The Hokage would also send in an Anbu to start teaching Naruto more about reading and calligraphy. Hiruzen had some beginner's books on sealing that a 5-year-old could potentially understand. Though Naruto wasn't academically smart, it was a real surprise when he took to Fuinjutsu like a fish to water. Unbeknownst to the old man, the beginner's book he gifted Naruto was one written by Kushina, who also struggled at academics. So the book was very visual rather than theoretical. Kushina had a lot of spare time in the village during the Third War due to being kept in Konoha, as she was essentially the village's trump card in wars. So she decided to write about Fuinjutsu and Kenjutsu, her 2 specialties. The book specified what each squiggle and symbol meant, how to easily draw them, with examples and types of games that could tie into drawing the correct symbol. It was the perfect book for Naruto Uzumaki. That wasn't to say Naruto did everything on his own. The Hokage told him there was an Anbu waiting outside if he had any questions or words he had trouble reading. Naruto was confused as to why an Anbu would be assigned to help him read a book, but he thanked him anyway. Dog was a great help. Dog aka Kakashi Hatake, who was on break after a recent Anbu Team RO mission, was ecstatic when the Hokage asked if he would teach Naruto to read better to help him begin Fuinjutsu. This was the perfect chance to get to spend time with Minato sensei and Kushina Nei's son and fill in some parenting roles. Kakashi was a little bitter that the Hokage didn't allow Naruto to be adopted by anyone. But he knew the situation was looked at from a military point of view. That wasn't to say he would turn down the chance to act like the older brother to Naruto he should have. If it weren't for that night 5 years ago. He didn't just teach Naruto reading and writing, he also got him started with some basic mathematics and read him stories about the Yondaime. Kakashi also took the opportunity to help Naruto unlock his chakra network. It took a while, but when it came out it blasted out. The blonde boy had absolutely no control over his chakra, as it was the size of an ocean, even at the age of 5.5. Naruto was a bit slow when it came to learning, like Obito in that regard, but he was determined to learn all he could and strive to get better, also like Obito. While he enjoyed his time with Naruto, he couldn't help but pity his future academy sensei. The boy couldn't stay still if he was held at gunpoint. Across the village, a man with a scar across his nose sneezed. Kakashi was impressed with how quickly Naruto understood the basics of sealing, faster than Minato-sensei taught him. He theorized that it was in the blood. While Hiruzen was oblivious, the silver-haired man knew it was Kushina's book they were reading, as Kakashi was guarding her while she finished it. Fortunately for Hiruzen, Kakashi censored Kushina's name or the Uzumaki clan in the book. So he was safe from explanations, for now. It wasn't that the Anbu agreed with hiding Naruto's heritage, but he knew the implications if it ever got released. It would be chaos. While Naruto didn't enjoy reading, when he got invested in something he would stick to it. Fuinjutsu is something that Naruto will make sure he masters. Even if it killed him, believe it. 1 year later, a figure perched on the tip of the Yondaime's spiky stone. While all of those in the village went about their business, they were ignorant of the attack about to commence. The clock was just about to hit noon, as the cloaked figure gained a mischievous grin, and stated, "Boom," and there was chaos after a great explosion of paint. Yes, a great explosion of paint erupted from all over the village, in multiple colors. The cause of this attack was from new up-and-coming seal master, Naruto Uzumaki. The 6-year-old Jinchuriki has recently mastered the technique and symbols for a storage seal, and he was able to apply it all over the village and streets with multiple tags. In those tags, he sealed gallons upon gallons of paint that would cover up buildings and streets. Naruto thought it was genius. Whoever wrote that book he got was a badass. There was a whole section dedicated to using seals to prank. The seal was relatively simple, for an Uzumaki applied 2 separate settings to the tags, the sealing kanji for timer and explosion. Naruto just copied it down and applied the settings to the tags, which would all go off in an explosion at noon. You may be wondering how Naruto was able to make so many tags in just a year. Well, let's just say Kakashi had a hand in the prank. The silver-haired Anbu still has some resentment towards the village for his father's treatment by them. Getting all that paint was troublesome. But he snuck into the storage room of the paint store and managed to seal it away. He was lucky he had a lot of that Chikora stuffed dog mentioned. When Naruto said he would paint the town, he literally meant it. He snuck into everywhere and hid everything. Hokage Tower. Done. Academy. Done. Hyuga Compound. Pink. Nara, Yamanaka, Akamichi compounds. Done. Main Street. Beautiful. Essentially everywhere was hid with paint, except the Uchiha compound. For whatever reason, the old man explicitly forbade him from going towards that place. Although the boy liked being rebellious, he knew the tone in the Hokage's voice meant trouble if he disobeyed. So he promised. And he wouldn't break his promises. If even the old man was afraid of that place, who knew what kind of horrors went on in that compound? Uchiha compound, meantime. In the woods of the Uchiha compound, a little 6-year-old girl with shoulder-length black hair and big onyx eyes giggled happily as she saw a foot sticking out by a tree. She skipped up to the tree and saw an older boy looking down at her when she cheered. "Ni-san," the girl called out happily, "I found you." Itachi Uchiha smiled down at his little sister. He always liked to spend time with Satsuki. She is by far the most important person in his life, and he would be more than willing to sacrifice himself to preserve her innocence from the shinobi world. He poked her on the forehead with his index and middle fingers. The girl was knocked back a bit by the force and shouted "Ga." Itachi continued to tease the pouting girl, "Forgive me, Satsuki. Maybe next time," and the shadow clone dispelled. Satsuki's big eyes widened as she got super annoyed. Oi. Itachi smiled from afar. The 11-year-old would be joining the Anbu Black Ops next week. So any time with his sister was worth it. Satsuki is the biggest bright spot in his life, and playing with her allows him to escape from the mess of the clan's politics. It took a while for the transfer to occur. But the Hokage agreed to allow Itachi to join the Anbu. He wants to protect Konoha from the shadows, like a true shinobi should. It didn't take long for his father, Fugaku, to agree to his transfer to the corp. As he had some ulterior motives involved for the clan's benefit. His mother took a little more convincing. He had just finished practicing his Shuriken Jutsu course on the targets around him. When his shadow clone, playing hide-and-seek with Satsuki, dispelled. So it wasn't a surprise when a cute, fuming, and pouting Satsuki came marching over to him. Itachi rolled his dark eyes when he saw his sister over-exaggerating the situation. Ni-san. Satsuki dramatically stomped her foot down while glaring at her brother, causing the two spiky bangs framing her pale face to bounce up and down. Itachi cocked an eyebrow at the girl. Yes, Satsuki. You cheated. The girl pointed an accusing finger at her idol. Yes, Satsuki loves her brother. He's always looking out for her, playing with her, encouraging her, and is always there for her. But that didn't mean she was happy he cheated though. Cheated. Itachi seemed genuinely offended, causing his sister to sob. Up a little and look apologetic for the accusation, but that stopped when her brother smirked smugly at her. Only those who lose accuse others of cheating. Satsuki turned red in the face and went to rant again at Itachi, but the boy simply poked her eyebrow again. Forgive me, Satsuki. Satsuki rubbed the spot on her forehead while sulking. That's when she noticed the targets around the place, with kunai hitting the dead center of each. Her pouty face soon turned into a face full of joy, eyes sparkling in delight. Ni-san, you're doing Shuriken Jutsu. Can you teach me, please? Itachi looked down at his sister's pleading face. Before rubbing the small tear troughs below his eyes, that are progressively growing due to the stress he was suffering from the clan. Itachi didn't really want Satsuki to become a shinobi. It wasn't that he was misogynistic or unconfident of her abilities, he just didn't want his little sister to face the same horrors he did, witnessing a battle of a great war and tragedies like the death of his friend, comrade, Tenma. He was extremely thankful Satsuki wasn't a natural prodigy like him, or the clan and their father would force her down a similar path to him. Using those talents for the benefit of the clan, destroying her childhood for the sake of power. Itachi is a generational prodigy, only seen in the likes of Minato Namikaze, Orochimaru of the Sannin, and Kakashi Hatake. He is considered the most talented Uchiha since Madara himself. He has always been able to think through situations from a young age better than most Chunin and Jonin, and can come up with plans on the spot. He was able to produce a Jonin-sized Great Fireball Jutsu at the age of 5, and could hit the bullseye with a shuriken before he could walk. Due to his skills, the elders were keen to take advantage of his skills to benefit the clan, essentially turning him into a Uchiha weapon. This caused Itachi to lose his childhood for the sake of training, while Itachi wanted to be a shinobi to protect what he loved. The pressure and responsibility placed on him from a young age is painful. Itachi was thankful he had his mother, his sister, Izumi, and Shisui to keep him sane during his earlier genin years. Thinking back to Satsuki, he knew the role a woman in a clan would have to take up. Despite being one of Konoha's strongest shinobis, his mother had to retire due to childbirth to take up the role as a housewife. Makoto would never complain about it, as she was allowed to see her children grow up, but she did feel a bit trapped. Itachi was lucky his parents' marriage was genuine. In most situations regarding the clan head's family, there would have been an arranged marriage between Uchihas in order to keep the Sharingan bloodline secured. Itachi thought it was disgusting and he'd be damned if he let his sister be treated like a trophy wife to some bastard. Apparently his father is already in marriage negotiations with one of his henchmen, an Abe Uchiha, who had a son the same age as Satsuki. Itachi knows Satsuki is a very ambitious girl and he admires her for it. Even if he is overprotective of her, he knows there will come a time where Satsuki will have to stand up and become strong both as a shinobi and a person, and hopefully not relying on the clan. He told his sister she would surpass him and he was being serious. So he'd help her grow strong. Looking back down at shining eyes, Itachi sighed. Fine, but I'll only teach you the basics. You'll be able to learn more at the academy next month. Satsuki jumped up and down in response. Satsuki was to join the academy in the next month, so this would be the last chance to really spend with her easily. Yes, thank you Ni-san. The girl hugged her brother, who softly hugged back. Edic. I removed the kunais from the targets and walked back up to Satsuki, who looked very excited. Itachi pointed to the target closest to them. Can you hit the target when you stand from there? He asked his sister, who nodded frantically in response. Yep. She ran to pick up a kunai from Itachi's hand. Satsuki looked at the target with determined eyes and took a deep breath. With a loud squeak grunt she hit the bullseye. But the kunai fell off a moment later, due to the hit not being deep enough. Satsuki went from ecstatic to downcast in a matter of seconds. Her cheeks gained a shade of red fro. Embarrassing herself in front of her brother. Itachi merely smiled and ruffled her messy hair, much to her dismay. That was good, he praised, and his sulking sister looked up at him. You have the technique and hand motions all perfected, all you need is power in the throw. Itachi threw it at a pace she could see as it went right into the bullseye. But that will come with age. Satsuki beamed up at her brother with a big, happy nod. The two continued to practice for another 30 minutes. That was when Satsuki looked down at the ground again. Say, Ni-san. Itachi looked down at his timid sister. It was an unusual sight for her around him. So Itachi nodded slowly. Why doesn't Tu-san acknowledge me? Itachi sighed quietly at the question. He knows that Satsuki is self-conscious about how their father views her. While she idolizes both him and their mother, Makoto, she doesn't believe that Fugaku views her with any shinobi potential. The problem is that Satsuki is measuring herself to Itachi's level. Anyone would feel insignificant against him, but Satsuki wants to make her father proud and to be a big part of the clan's future. The girl is slightly aware about the whole arranged marriage thing. And she doesn't want to be viewed as a burden to her family, or something to sell off for their benefit. Satsuki wants to surpass her brother as a shinobi, and her mother as a woman. She wants to make a name for herself, not just viewed as Itachi's little sister, or Uchiha-sama. Those titles aren't earned by her, and can be given to anyone born in her position. Most of all, she wants her father to be proud of her in the same way he is proud of Itachi, and so he can tell her, that's my girl, and teach her ninjutsu. Itachi broke her out of her thoughts when he poked her forehead again. And crouched beside her, making his long hair plop around. Tu-san does acknowledge you, Satsuki. Itachi smiled at the girl in front of him, who stared at him with big eyes containing brimming tears. He just has a lot going on right now. Tu-san isn't the best at showing his emotions, like me. Satsuki giggled slightly at her brother's self-awareness, causing Itachi's smile to widen. He stood up and stretched a little, looking down at his sister. Just focus on your childhood and having fun, you'll be fine. Worry about being a shinobi when you go to the academy. Satsuki nodded slightly with a small grin. Thank you Ni-san. Itachi nodded with a smile before crouching down in front of Satsuki, who looked confused. Itachi continued smiling at her. Come on, I'll carry you home. Satsuki's eyes widened with an ear-to-ear grin, and gave a happy nod, before jumping on her brother's back. As the siblings walked home through the compound, they were greeted by waves and bows from the other Uchihas. Itachi nodded back in respect while Satsuki bashfully waved back, quite embarrassed. She should be used to the treatment she received by now. Being the child of the main family of the Uchiha was a high status. But she didn't feel like she deserved the treatment, yet. So she buried her small head into the back of her brother's neck, hiding from the attention. Itachi old sense her embarrassment and his lips twitch upwards slightly, at least she wasn't letting the treatment get to her head. Their thoughts were interrupted when a loud voice caught their attention. Well. If it isn't my favorite siblings. Satsuki and Itachi looked behind them and saw a boy a couple years older than Itachi. He had a huge grin on his face, with short messy black hair being held up by a Konoha headband. He wore a brown tanto harness around his shoulders, over his black high-color Uchiha t-shirt. He has similar tear troughs under his eyes to Itachi. This was Shisui Uchiha, a Konoha Chunin and Itachi's best friend. Itachi smirked as Shisui walked up to them and ruffled little Satsuki's long hair, much to her annoyance. Shisui merely grinned down at the girl. You still don't like me, Satsuki-chan. The girl pouted and looked away with a HN, causing the two boys to laugh, making her pale cheeks turn pink in embarrassment. Don't worry, Shisui reassured Satsuki, making her look at him confusingly. The older boy smiled again and said, I know how jealous you get when I steal Itachi-kun to train with. Her cheeks reddened again. I know how much you love him, he whispered teasingly. Her blushing cheeks turned atomically red, as she sunk away into her brother's neck with a groan and Shisui to laugh full-heartedly. Itachi shook his head at his friend's over-the-top nature. Shisui was an oddity among the Uchiha, and despite his talents, never got arrogant. Shisui took Itachi under his wing before he graduated the academy and taught him how to be a shinobi. They have grown to be best friends with one another. It is interesting seeing the blank Itachi interacting with the lively Shisui, but they have made it work. Itachi attempted to save his sister from any further embarrassment. Is there anything you need, Shisui? The prodigy asked. Shisui sobered up slightly and nodded. Yep. Makoto-sama asked me to tell you lunch is ready, and that she'd hunt you down if you're not there by midday. Both Satsuki and Itachi paled at that. Looking at his watch, he saw it was 3 minutes to 12, and he started panicking. Their mother was a very kind lady. But she gets angry if she is impatient or disobeyed. Itachi once saw his mother ripping into Fugaku after his father made him see that battlefield during the Third War. Fugaku slept on the couch for a month. He shook his head slightly before nodding to Shisui. Thanks, we should get going. Satsuki started patting Itachi like a horse to make him move, said boy groaned while Shisui chuckled again. Itachi started walking back to their house. I'll see you after lunch for training. Shisui called out. Itachi nodded, walking away. Bye Shisui-san, Satsuki called out, waving back to the boy, who smiled and waved in return. When the two were out of sight, Shisui sighed and looked around. I hope the clan doesn't ruin this peace. And with that, the boy used his classic jutsu, and shunshined away. Fugaku and Makoto's house. Makoto Uchiha smiled as she finished preparing lunch for her children. It was Itachi's time off before his introduction into the Anbu and she wanted to make the most of his presence. Before he started taking missions. While Makoto was again sending her baby boy into the Anbu world, she knew her husband wouldn't change his mind, so she managed to bite her tongue. Fugak. Yu was busy working for the police force and couldn't make it back for lunch. Apparently, a kid painted most of the village for a prank. She smiled as it reminded her of a prank Kushina did years ago. The smile vanished though as she recalled that day 6 years ago, when Minato, Kushina, and Naruto all passed away. Since that day, it was rare for Makoto to leave far outside the compound, with the exception of doing clan business in other nations or the old Uchiha hideouts. She would keep up with her shinobi training whenever she could, because who knew if something came to threaten her children and family. The Kyuubi made sure she remembered that. When she heard the rumors about a new Jinchuriki years ago, Fugaku only told her that he was a little 3-year-old, who had an abnormally high chakra capacity. She questioned hopefully if this boy was Naruto, but Fugaku sadly shook his head. Although the Hokage already told her Naruto was dead, there was still a sliver of hope in her mind that the old man lied. Which wasn't uncommon for the Sandaime. But her husband confirming was a bitter pill to swallow. Unbeknownst to Makoto, Fugaku did connect the dots but wanted to protect his wife from any potential rejection of adopting the boy. So Makoto went about her life, focusing on raising her children and looking after her family, which made the years fly past for her. The sound of the front door opening and the happy noise of her youngest caused Makoto to beam. Ka-san, we're home. Satsuki ran into the kitchen after taking off her shoes. She was quite dirty from the training in the morning. Satsuki looked almost like an exact copy of Makoto, with slightly darker and more spiky hair. That's great, Suki-chan. Satsuki pouted at her mother's nickname, causing the older woman to giggle. Ka-san, I told you to stop calling me that. The 6-year-old whined, but her mother simply closed her eyes with a smile. Well, maybe I will after you wash yourself off, she said gently, but also as a command. Satsuki blinked and saw the trail of dirt following her into the kitchen, and became a little bashful. Sorry Ka-san, The girl apologized softly, but Makoto just walked up to her and kissed the top of her head. It's fine, as she pointed to the bathroom. Go wash up. Satsuki nodded and skipped over to the bathroom. Makoto smiled at her daughter's innocence, glad she could have a childhood unlike Itachi. Makoto turned around to see her son and smiled sadly. She loves Itachi more than the world, but was sad that he would be signing away the last of his innocence by joining Anbu. Itachi could almost read the thoughts out of her head and slowly walks over to his still deep in thought mother. She's a little startled when Itachi gently hugged her, because Itachi is never one who likes physical contact. With the exception of Satsuki. He is still shorter than her but will soon be taller. I am doing this so she doesn't have to. Itachi softly whispered the cryptic message to his mother, who could understand it immediately as she hugged back. She knew Itachi was more than willing to sacrifice himself to protect Satsuki, whether it be from the pressure of the clan or even death. They broke their hug just as Satsuki came hopping into the room. She scrunched up her nose in confusion. What are you doing? The mother and son duo just looked at one another before smiling and walked into the dining room, leaving an annoyed girl behind. They're so weird, she idly thought. Lunch was a quiet affair, a little bit of conversation between the three of them, as Satsuki would talk about how cool Itachi was at Shuriken Jutsu. Itachi smiled softly while Satsuki continued speaking her praises towards him. I see, Makoto nodded, you're getting better, aren't you Suki-chan? The girl pouted at the name again, before nodding rapidly. Yep, I'll surpass Itachi before he knows it. Itachi just tapped her forehead again, much to her annoyance. Who knows? Itachi took a strange joy out of seeing his sister's fuming, determined face. Before she could respond, Itachi asked his mother, by the way Ka-san, where's Tu-san? Makoto sighed at the question. He said he needed to stay over his lunch break. He told me a kid pulled a massive prank across the village and Main Street. She smiled fondly, much to the confusion of her children. Why are you smiling about that? Satsuki queried, making her mother's smile grow. It just reminds me of the past. She answers cryptically, causing Itachi to nod. He remembers Kushina Obasan's pranks, and for Satsuki to groan. Not wanting to be left out of something. Though that reminded Satsuki of something. Speaking of Main Street, the two at the table looked at her. Can I go to that clothes store near the Hokage Tower? I'm running out of skirts. Satsuki pleaded to her mother, who frowned. Makoto would trust her daughter to go to the center of the village, but some of the distrust with the village makes her reluctant. She has been in the village with her girl at times, and they would get a few side glances from the public. Not anything that Satsuki would notice, but Makoto could see the villagers' distaste towards the Uchiha. Why can't you just go to the shop your auntie runs? That was closer, and cheaper for the girl. But she just shook her head. No, the skirts I like have sold out at her shop. I need to go to Main Street. Makoto sighed quietly. Her girl was quite stubborn when it comes to this. Itachi, can you take Satsuki there? I have an errand to run. Itachi placed his chopsticks down and shook his head. I'm sorry, but I promised to train with Shisui after lunch. He apologized, as Satsuki stepped in. Hey, I'm a big girl now, I can go by myself. Makoto thought for a moment before relenting. Fine, Satsuki cheered, but she stopped cheering to listen to her mother. I don't want you talking to strangers, or getting lost. She said sternly. Just take the route out of the woods, and follow towards the Hokage monument. Satsuki nodded in acceptance. I want you back by 3 o'clock, is that understood? Makoto demanded. Yes Ka-san. Makoto nodded, as she took out a few ryos to give to her daughter. Be back soon. Satsuki smiled and ran out the house. Itachi watched her leave before turning back to his mother. Are you sure it's a good idea to let her go out and about so early? Itachi was slightly worried about her sister. Makoto beamed at his overprotective nature. It's fine, Konoha is a friendly place. She reassured him. Besides, there will be police members around, who we know will protect her. Itachi hesitantly nodded. Itachi helped Makoto clear the table and clean the dishes, as they silently worked on the washing. He decided to ask his mother, what really kept Tu-san from coming back. Makoto groaned under her breath. She mentally cursed her son's sharpness. He's just stressed, that's all. The elders are pushing him a lot, but I have hope he can improve the current situation. Itachi inclined his head in agreement, hoping his father could resolve the clan's issues. Military Police Force Headquarters. Fugaku sighed. That wasn't an uncommon sight for him recently. This situation really has taken its toll on him and his family. Having to spend overtime with the elders and managing the police force means coming home late. Then when he does come home, he's either too tired or annoyed to spend time with his beautiful wife and 2 children. His children were another issue in itself. One of his biggest regrets was forcing Itachi to use his lens to progress quickly through the ranks. Now as an Anbu, despite working as an agent for the Uchiha clan and a perfect soldier, there wasn't much of his son in there. Maybe when the clan matters are resolved, he can attempt to fix his son and brighten his personality. Satsuki was a different story. Though he'd never tell anybody but Makoto, Fugaku is extremely overprotective of Satsuki and wants to maintain her innocence. He doesn't want to push her into becoming a shinobi, or follow the lifestyle on the battlefield. The Uchiha clan head is aware of Satsuki's insistence to surpass Itachi and follow in her brother's footsteps. But he doesn't want for her to waste her adolescence in order to gain his acknowledgement as a soldier. He rubbed his eyes as he finished the crime report for the week. He saw a high increase of pranks around the village with the use of sealing scrolls, exactly like how Kushina would do it during her academy years. When he heard who committed the crimes, he nearly had a panic attack. It was said to be done by the Jinchuriki boy, who was called Naruto Uzumaki. Fugaku asked the Sandaime about the boy when it was leaked, as he was the same age and had the Me as the son of one of his best friends, if he survived. This opened the door to a possibility the boy survived. But Sarutobi just said the boy was an orphan who was named in memory of their dead child. But after him committing these pranks and possessing the same personality as Makoto's best friend, and when he finally saw what the boy looked like in the report document, he had the same looks as Minato and same face as Kushina. It was true, Naruto survived. He was willing to accuse the Hokage of not trusting the Uchiha clan to such information, knowing that his family would be more than willing to adopt the boy. Though he thwarted that plan when he realized none of the other clans knew, as they would line up to adopt Naruto as well. He suspected Hiruzen was merely protecting the boy from the risks of his parents' enemies and clan politics. He had to admit it to the professor. He did a good job keeping the brat's identity from the clan heads, especially with the boy going out in public frequently. His apartment block was quite a distance from any clan districts, especially far from the Uchiha clan. He maybe should thank the old man as well, because Fugaku could tell Naruto's status and reputation would shed an even worse light on the Uchiha, if they were to adopt him. That wasn't to say he didn't want to protect the boy. Maybe he could be Satsuki's genin teammate. He idly thought. Fugaku looked at the pile of files on his desk. When Makoto finds out, this size will be quadrupled. He muttered, while imagining the consequences of Naruto being hidden from Makoto. His wife wasn't as notorious as the red-hot habanero for her fury, but it wasn't pretty when she got angry. He learned that the hard way after he took a 4-year-old Itachi to a battlefield of the Third Great Ninja War. I'll make sure to never do that with Satsuki. Fugaku thought with a shiver, remembering his wife's rage. Turning away from the blonde child's reports, he thought back to his meeting with the clan elders. The elder council was full of old coots who wish for the village to bow at the clan's feet. Fugaku despised them, especially after they started pressuring him to use the rest of the military police force to commence their plans for the future. The elders are really pompous, believing they had the control of the clan, and that Fugaku was a mere puppet for them. He is, wicked eye Fugaku, damn it. But with the current situation, it was true that they had a point. The Uchiha's relations with the rest of the village was at an all-time low. The death of Minato was a devastating blow both personally and business-wise. It took his wife 2 weeks to get out of the house afterwards, and that was just from the death of Kushina and Minato. Then another bombshell was that their infant son, Naruto, died as well. Makoto would spend a lot more time preoccupied herself on looking after the house and children, so she wouldn't have to think about the loss of her second family. Back to the Uchiha. Minato's good favors with his clan was perfect, and they started striving again. Now that the past his best Sandaime was back in power, he would pass many responsibilities to his Tobarama East Council. This would lead to more prejudice and segregation, even relocating them to the village outskirts surrounded by Anbu surveillance towers. Everything has a boiling point, and the Uchiha are no different. With Itachi's introduction to the Anbu, it was the perfect opportunity to have an inside man. As much as he hated using his own son like this, it is for the betterment of the clan. Both Itachi and especially Satsuki can grow up peacefully, without the threat of segregation or worse, death. And with that, the plans of a coup d'état begin. Hokage Tower. Brown eyes looked into blue eyes. The blue eyes looked nervously back. The staring contest ended when Hiruzen let out a long sigh. Naruto-kun. He started, why did you feel the need to cover the entire village in paint? The leader looked disappointingly down at the boy, causing Naruto to shrink in his seat. I thought it would be funny. The boy defended poorly, causing the Hokage to shake his head. Well, it was not fun. Why, at all? Hiruzen glared slightly at the boy, causing his eyes to brim with tears. I know you enjoyed learning sealing, but causing such an uproar would have made the villagers too nervous. Naruto wanted to respond, but the old man cut him off. I thought you wanted to gain their acknowledgement. The blonde boy nodded slightly. Well, you won't be gaining any favors with them with this. He stood up from his chair and walked to the window. I want you to say sorry to those you pranked. Naruto's eyes widened with that, but the old man wasn't done. I also want you to stop with any fuinjutsu practice. Azure eyes widened even more. Clearly you weren't ready to deal with the responsibilities of the art. Maybe with time you will mature, but you can't use that talent to harass the peaceful villagers. Naruto suddenly growled and abruptly stood up and glared at the Hokage. Why? Why am I supposed to say sorry when they get to glare at me like I killed their family? Hiruzen stood still, with mouth agape. All I did was a prank. No one got hurt. The fuming, teary-eyed blonde pointed an accusing finger at the still frozen Sandaime. Yo, you're just like the rest of them. Naruto show. UTED before running out the office before Hiruzen could respond. The slam of his door woke him from his trance, before sighing sadly and sitting down. He looked over at the portrait of his late successor. I'm sorry, Minato. Downtown Konoha. Naruto stormed out of the Hokage Tower and made his way towards his apartment, when he heard even more whispers and insults targeted his way. Why is he STILL here? A glare, I'd feel safer if he just went away. Another glare, disappear. A spit, it's him. A whisper, that boy. A sneer. On every person, they all had those hateful eyes that wished for him to vanish. Those eyes hurt him more than their words. They couldn't hide their true emotions from their eyes. Naruto shut his eyes in place as he shouted in his mind, go away, why do those eyes follow me everywhere? He wouldn't dare speak back, as it would never get him acknowledged. So he put up his natural defense mask, throwing on a big grin as he tried to ignore their hatred. He walked through the street, downtrodden in his mind. As people kept their distance, but also glared and whispered behind his back. I can't believe Sandai, doesn't he care about our soft? Yondaime-sama would still be ally. Naruto's little fists clenched while squeezing his eyes shut. Why? What did I do? He started to run down the street, noticing them flinch and step backwards, when he suddenly moved. He set his sights on a spot he would go when he was lonely. Unaware of Naruto, he was being looked at by a pair of big onyx eyes of a small figure. Why did they look at him like that? And why is he smiling? The young girl questioned, curious, as she moved to follow the blonde. Outside of Ninja Academy. It was the middle of summer in Konoha, so the Ninja Academy was currently on break. Naruto always comes here when he gets excited about going to the academy, which he would be joining in a month. Although, it is also nice and quiet without classes or people to glare at him. Whenever it was empty, Naruto would waddle over to the big tree outside the academy main entrance. There sat a wooden swing, that ever so slightly swayed in the wind. He would plop himself down on the swing and let the wind take him. He got attached to going on the swing because it was something he could play by himself, though he would like to imagine being pushed by someone else. So, miserably, Naruto started to swing back and forth as he allowed tears to cascade down his eyes. Will I ever be loved here? Why isn't TT the Somio someone who loves me? Naruto rhetorically shouted in his mind as he gasped for air. After using his ragged, white t-shirt to rub away the tears, he continued to swing back and forth, in his own world. So deep in thought, he missed a voice muttering behind him. What is there for me here? Naruto thought, completely resigned to his fate of being alone. I know Tyuki Jichan and Ayame Nichan care, but when I go there, people always leave. He sniffled again. I'm like a disease. He once again missed the voice behind him, which was getting progressively impatient. Even Hokage Jii. I mean the Hokage is lying to me about my PP parents. And other stuff. There was a slight growl behind him, but he chalked it off for his imagination. Naruto smiled in resignation. Maybe there isn't anything in Konoha, but I could leave and get rest. ECT somewhere else. His musing was shut off when there was a roar behind him. Oi! Naruto jumped off his swing in shock and fell on the hard floor. His azure eyes widened when he turned around on ground and looked up to see a fuming, black-haired girl glaring down at him. But it wasn't a glare like the villagers. No, this was a glare of pure annoyance, that had no hidden intentions behind their eyes, just her real emotion. Naruto managed to get out of his daze, and stopped staring at the girl, whose cheeks reddened at his gaze. Nobody has stared at her with such interest before other than her brother or her mother. Who are you, Datbeo? Naruto stuttered out, but the pretty girl just crossed her arms over her chest. No, I want to know who you are. Satsuki ordered this boy, who sat there jaw slackened. No one ever asked him who he was. For some reasons, all the adults know about him and their children were told to keep away from him. It was rare to be on the receiving end of a real questioning, so he answered. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto mentally cursed his nervousness. The girl in question raised an eyebrow at the odd boy's name. Before she could ask her question, Naruto managed to get his bite back. And who are you, Ibeo? Naruto suddenly demanded as he jumped to his feet, wanting to know who this girl was that had stopped his swing time. The girl's black eyes widened slightly. Before she smirked a bit, proud to show off her name. Satsuki Uchiha. Minutes earlier, Satsuki had just finished buying her clothes from the store when she started walking back to the compound. Though on the way past the Hokage Tower, she saw a crowd surrounding something. Curiosity got the better of her, as she used her small size to navigate through the crowd, to see them all staring down at a little blonde boy. Satsuki could see all these people around her staring at the boy with eyes full of hatred and disgust, and whispering nasty things to each other about him. Confusing things like, "It's him, that boy." The young Uchiha noticed the adults pulling their children away from the boy saying, "Stay away from that boy, he's no good." The odd thing was that the blonde boy being scrutinized was grinning. An odd smile that stretched from ear to ear with his eyes closed. He looked quite like a fox with his grin, which for some reason seemed to anger the crowd even more. After a few more moments of glares and insults, she saw his fists clench as he ran towards the academy. As the crowd snarled and dispersed, Satsuki was left with one thought: why are they looking at him like that? And why is he smiling? She would have most definitely snapped back at them if they glared at her like that, yet he smiled. She needs to find out more. Outside of Ninja Academy, Satsuki arrived outside the place she would be attending in a month's time. Looking around for the boy, she saw him softly swaying on a wooden swing. Satsuki walked slowly up behind the boy. Excuse me?" Satsuki timidly asked. Although she was an energetic girl at home, she could be quite shy around people she doesn't know, especially when she was the first person to reach out. She could also be quite introverted, not wanting other kids to talk to her. The Uchiha waits a few moments, with no reply from the boy. She sighed. "Excuse me?" Satsuki asked again, getting a little impatient. The oblivious blonde continued to swing back and forth, seemingly in his own world. After she asked again and once more got no response, she is now really annoyed and irritated at his denseness. "Grr," the raven-haired girl growled out, from the lack of response. She noticed the lips of the blonde twitch into a sad smile, but she thought he was mocking her. Satsuki forgets all previo. His bashfulness and stomps her foot down on the ground and shouts at the oblivious boy. "Oh I. The girl roared, causing the blonde to fall off the swing in surprise and land on his butt. The boy stared wide-eyed at Satsuki, who glared down at him in annoyance. Though the blonde continued gazing at her closely, which caused her pale cheeks to gain a hint of pink at the attention. No one ever stared at her with such interest before. other than her mother and brother. The blue-eyed boy managed to get out of his shock and demanded, Who are you, Datbeo? He stood up and patted the dirt off of him. Satsuki was still taller than him, which she thought was funny. Satsuki blinked at his verbal tick, but just ignored it and crossed her arms over her chest and commanded, No, I want to know who you are. This boy interested her for some reason. Probably because she could tell his smile was more than meets the eye. His jaw slackened at the question for some reason, but he answered meekly. Naruto Uzumaki. Satsuki raised an eyebrow at that. It was quite a strange name, but she was compassionate enough not to mention it. She went to speak her question about the crowd and his smile when he got his voice back. And who are you? The short boy demanded loudly, with more confidence in his voice. Satsuki's onyx eyes widened slightly. It was rare for someone to shout back at her. Whenever she went to the park and saw other kids who wanted to mess around or play with her, she would usually give off the aura of superiority and dominance. This boy just ignored it and gave off his own aura of confidence and ignorance. While she was embarrassed by the high-class treatment of her status in the clan compound, for some reason, bragging about it to an outsider felt good, so she simply smirked. Proud to show off her name and said, Satsuki Uchiha. Naruto stared at the girl, who in return, stared back at him. She was wearing a black high-collared t-shirt and a white skirt. As well as a weird red and white thing on her back. He was wearing an old white t-shirt with a Land of Fire emblem in the center. This girl, Satsuki, is giving him a look he has never seen before. The villagers stare at him with looks of disgust, hatred, and ultimately fear. The shinobi look at him with looks of worthlessness, slight fear, and also some disgust. It's quite mixed. Sometimes, Chuki Jichin and the Hokage give him concealed looks of pity that they try to hide, but he can see them. Even those annoying bullies that beat him up and destroyed his favorite red scarf from when he helped that girl with the weird eyes. They had looks of being high and mighty, as well as full of arrogance. That girl he saved from the bullies also had a look of fear, but it was probably towards the bullies. She left as he fell unconscious, so he suspected she feared him too. But this girl, she was looking at him with curiosity. He never got looked at like with this look. It was always fear, pity, or hatred. Satsuki Uchiha. He tested the words out on the tongue. The girl in question looked a little smug when he said her name for some reason. Satsuki smirked slightly, assuming he boy was surprised to meet a member of the Uchiha clan. It wasn't every day a member of the village's most prestigious clan would come and talk to you. That line of thinking ended though, when Satsuki quickly reminded herself about upholding her clan's honor. Her mother and brother have gotten it into her head that using the clan's name to inflate your ego will cause overconfidence as a shinobi, aka death. Satsuki thought about a lecture her mother gave her. Ka-san also told me that the women of the clan have to be elegant and polite, always smiling and treating people with respect. Her using was cut off when Naruto started talking. That's a stupid name. Naruto scrunched his nose up at the name. Satsuki gaped in shock at Naruto's bold proclamation. She has never had her name insulted. At least not to her face. What? She stammered, still in shock from Naruto's insult. Your name, Satsuki. Naruto said it like it was obvious. It sounds dumb. The Uchiha got out of her surprised trance. Before her face heated up in both embarrassment and anger. Her thoughts about acting polite and elegant are long discarded. She wanted to tear this annoying blonde a new one. She pointed a threatening finger right at Naruto's nose. You can't told about dumb names. You're named after a topping for that disgusting soup. She shouted at the boy, who blinked in confusion, before his face quickly morphed in comical anger matching Satsuki's. It means maelstrom. Like swirling whirlpools. It's a cool name. Naruto defended his name, before he recalled Satsuki's second, personal, insult, and ramen is not disgusting. It's the food of gods. He screamed back at the red-cheeked girl, who was still glaring at him. Ramen is not the food of gods. Tomatoes are. Satsuki's Uchiha honor has now been forgotten. She is now competing in a screaming contest about food with a boy she met less than 10 minutes ago. You look like a tomato. For whatever reason, Naruto felt a shiver from the afterlife for that comment. Satsuki quickly put a hand to feel her burning, red cheeks, causing her blush to exponentially increase. She started shaking in a type of embarrassed rage. Naruto Act 2. Ali took a step back when he felt her aura. Satsuki then pointed right at Naruto's cheek. At least I don't have stupid whiskers on my cheeks. You look like a cat. That was a lie. Satsuki actually thought the whisker looked cute. But she'd rather die than admit it. Naruto's eyes widened at the insult, but instead of continuing the chain of insults like she expected and secretly enjoyed, he bashfully mumbled something quietly. Too quiet for her to hear. What was that? She demanded from the boy, whose cheeks surprisingly lit up. Naruto looked up at her and mumbled, I said, it's more like a fox. His embarrassed blush spread across his face. Naruto used to be very self-conscious about his whiskers. They were considered different and he hadn't seen anyone else with them, maybe his family had them. He saw that dog family have marks on their face, but that was the closest to a connection. He learned to love his whiskers though, as it was something that made him unique and special. Satsuki gasped quietly at his confession, before surprising the both of them by giggling. That cute giggle soon turned into hearty laughter. Naruto stood as still as a statue. Other than Hiruzen and Kyuki, he never heard any laughter other than overhearing it in the streets. This wasn't a mocking laughter, like those bullies had after he failed to make clones. This was a happy laugh. Soon enough, Naruto realized what he said was pretty funny, and he started laughing too. Satsuki felt something different about this boy. From his reaction to the public's distaste towards him, for whatever reason it was. How he talked back to her and doesn't let up, his warm laughter, and an odd sense of comfort when being around the blonde, it feels relaxing. The two children continued to laugh along with each other. Until Satsuki stopped and rubbed her eyes that had a few tears in them. She then smiled at Naruto and apologized. He may have insulted her name first, but the Uchiha could tell the boy wasn't trying to be mean. I'm sorry. She bowed slightly, while Naruto stood uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being treated formally. I shouldn't have made fun of you. Naruto just shook his head and gave off his foxy grin and put his hands behind his head. No problem. I'm sorry for what I said too. He replied sincerely, scratching his cheek with a finger. Satsuki gave off her own closed-eye grin in response, not quite as big as his, but enough to show there were no hard feelings. There was no more tension in the air. What are you doing here? Satsuki asked Naruto, changing the subject completely. Naruto just smiled and pointed down at the swing. Just going on the swing. Before looking at the academy building. Also visiting the academy. I get to go this month Ibeo. Naruto said excitedly. Satsuki gasped in response. No way. Me too. She replied joyously. Naruto smiled happily, glad he would know somebody in the academy, even if she teased him. Awesome. We will be classmates. What Naruto didn't know was that there are 3 classes for each age group, so there was a chance they wouldn't be together. Satsuki didn't know that either, so she nodded merrily. Yep. She let out another smile. I can't wait to become a shinobi. Naruto nodded rapidly with a in agreement. He gave the girl another grin and threw his arms back behind his neck. I gotta get strong really fast Ibeo. At the girl's questioning look, his grin widened. I'm gonna be Hokage one day. He proudly stated, while looking up at the monument at the side, more specifically the 4th face to the right. Really? Satsuki asked. In awe. Naruto smiled and nodded at the girl. Satsuki couldn't help herself but tease the boy, so she smirked lightly at him. I didn't know the Hokage was supposed to be tiny. Naruto blinked in confusion, before growling, up, at the girl. He never realized how short he was until he saw someone his own age. That didn't mean he would let her get the last laugh. I'm not short. You're just a giant. He mocked Satsuki, making the black-haired girl growl back at him. She wasn't big at all, only a little taller to him. For some reason, she still felt insulted. Who are you calling giant? Who are you calling tiny? They went into another back and forth string of insults. For whatever reason, doing it was quite fun. The two children already have a weird sort of connection, where they are able to keep in sync with one another. Satsuki enjoyed it because she rarely gets to interact with people her own age, other than being put on a pedestal due to her clan head family status. She also isn't the most sociable person outside her family members, subconsciously considering any non-Uchiha as below her, as a way to cope with her inferiority complex in the clan towards her brother. Yet Naruto is different from the other kids she has met. Naruto enjoys having company in general. He never gets a chance to talk one-on-one with someone his age, and even if it is a match of insults. It feels nice. Eventually they tired themselves out by shouting and went to lie down. Satsuki still had an hour before she had to get home, so she decided to stay with the blonde enigma. As she still has to ask her question. The two sat on the ground, being shaded by the tree outside the academy. There wasn't much talking, just relaxing in the breeze. "So, I told you my dream," Naruto said as he looked over at Satsuki. "What's yours?" he asked curiously. Satsuki smiled. "I want to gain respect from my father and do well for my clan. I also want to surpass my brother," Satsuki replied happily, though her face was full of determination. Naruto pushed away any jealousy about her having a family, so he tilted his head in confusion. "What's a clan?" To which the girl stared at him like he was an idiot. "You don't know what a clan is?" Satsuki asked, baffled. Naruto just shook his head seriously. "No." He looked down sadly. "I grew up in the orphanage and never got to learn about that kind of thing." "Tt Ibeo." Satsuki looked surprised, and then sympathetically. "You're an orphan?" she asked solemnly. Naruto just nodded, but he gave her a big grin. "Yep. I'm not gonna let that stop me from being Hokage. I won't give up until I do it," he passionately declares. The girl was quite moved by his optimism, and smiles in return. "I believe in you." She gave him a closed-eye smile. Just like her mother did. Naruto beamed at her confidence in him. He's never had anyone really take him seriously when he made that declaration. The old man wished him good luck. But this was different, more genuine. "Thanks, Suki." The girl's cheeks reddened at the nickname. It was the same one her mother would use to tease her, but it was also quite affectionate. "But can you tell me what a clan is?" Naruto asked, now embarrassed that he doesn't know what it is. Satsuki recalled his previous question and nodded with a small grin. "Sure." Satsuki happily replied, before abruptly turning around while sitting down. Naruto was confused as to why this girl was showing him her back. That was before she pointed to the symbol on the back of her shirt. She pointed to the fan on her shirt. "Is the symbol of the Uchiha clan. It's the emblem of my family," she answered proudly. Naruto squinted his eyes at the symbol. "It looks like a lollipop," the blonde bluntly remarked. Instead of looking offended, Satsuki chortled cutely, "You're funny." Naruto smiled widely at the compliment. Satsuki, at first, thought it was a lollipop as well, but she was too afraid to say it to her family. It wasn't until Itachi told her it was a fan while he informed her the history of their clan when she was younger. "It's actually a fan." Naruto's mouth formed an O shape in understanding, as Satsuki continued. "The Uchiha clan is centered around fire, so we use wind from the fan to make the fire bigger." She dramatically retold him the same story Itachi told her. Naruto sat there in awe. "Wow," he stated in astonishment. He wonders if he might have a clan, but buried that thought away. "That's so cool. So you can make those big fireballs?" he queried, with stars in his eyes. Naruto had seen them whenever he observed the training grounds. Satsuki puffed out her chest proudly. "Of course. Maitu-san is going to teach it to me soon." Her smile dimmed a little. "After I get his attention." She looked down and mumbled to herself, but Naruto was able to hear her. Naruto may be pretty dense, but he could tell that this girl wanted the same acknowledgement from her father than he wanted from the village, so he attempted to clumsily comfort her. Satsuki was thinking about her father never treating her like she matters. "I know Ni-san is older, but the least he can do is seek care. I don't want him to see me as a burden." The more Satsuki thought about it, the more it hurt. She had recently overheard her brother and father arguing about her being pushed into an arranged marriage with this annoying boy, Kenshin. He was the son of her father's comrade, Anabe. Kenshin is a really arrogant boy, who loves parading his Uchiha name to others, in order to seem superior. She doesn't want her father to push her off to that boy, so she needs to get strong and win his acknowledgement, even if she is a girl. Her sad thoughts were cut off when Naruto poked her arm. She yelped slightly in surprise. "Do you want to talk about it?" Naruto asked softly. He didn't really know what to do in a situation to comfort others. Satsuki looks up at him and he saw her eyes are brimming with tears. So the blonde hesitantly wiped them away, surprising the girl. Satsuki stared at the boy next to her, a light blush on her pale cheeks. She thought for a moment, did she want to tell Naruto her problems? She is never able to vent about her issues to her family, in fear of stepping out of line. She doesn't know Naruto very well, other than his name and dream, yet she feels comfortable enough to cry in front of him. Something about his presence is very welcoming and warm, so she decides to let it out. The 6-year-old girl nodded slowly and looks at him. It's about my family. She doesn't want to come across as insensitive to Naruto, talking about family problems when he doesn't even have one. Naruto doesn't seem affected at all his concerns are entirely focused on the girl in front of him. What about them? He asked slowly. Satsuki sighed quietly. In my family, the role of a woman is different from a man. We are able to become shinobi, but we have to also get married young. Naruto was quite confused by her issue. From what he heard, marriage was a good thing, when two people like each other a lot. That's at least what Tsukiji-chan told him about his late wife. What's wrong with that? Isn't getting married good? Naruto naively questioned, to which Satsuki shook her head. It is good, it's just, we don't have a choice on who we marry. Tears built up in her eyes again. Being a member of the Uchiha clan and clan head's family, Satsuki needs to be ahead in terms of education. This means she can understand concepts far beyond her years, despite only being 6. She can understand the consequences of an arranged marriage. Naruto, on the other hand, is very much 6 years old. Why not? Satsuki knows that the questions he asked are natural. But it was annoying having to repeat her problems. Because my opinion doesn't matter. She screamed out, more so at herself than the shocked blonde beside her. Tears ran down her eyes as she vented. I'm forced to be married with this guy the first don't even like. The waterworks continued falling down her big onyx eyes. Naruto's eyes widened as he finally understood why she was so upset. He couldn't imagine being forced to be with someone he didn't like. He suddenly got really angry on her behalf. Why are they making you do this? He was furious as to why someone was treating Satsuki like this. For whatever reason, this momentarily stopped Satsuki's crying. It's because of the clan. At Naruto's perplexed expression, she elaborated, the Uchiha clan has a special ability. She didn't think Naruto would understand how bloodlines or the Sharingan works, so she didn't mention it. This ability needs to stay in the clan, and so the women are forced to arrange marriages with other clan members around their age, to keep the blood pure. Satsuki didn't really understand how it kept it pure, but that was what her mother told her after her eavesdropping. Naruto's face filled with dread. That's terrible, he shouted in horror. The young Jinchuriki didn't exactly know what she meant by special ability or pure blood, but he could understand that Satsuki is orc to do something she doesn't want to do. That thought made Naruto really angry. What are we going to do about it? Satsuki blinked in surprise at the blonde's determined question and tilted her head. She confusedly asked. Naruto looked at her as if to say, duh. And just stated, yes, we. He jumped to his feet and pointed down at her, who still sat there, looking adorably confused. I promise to help you in any way I can. Ibeo. A foxy grin formed on his face, and I don't break my promises. Satsuki sat still, staring up at the confident blonde, wide-eyed and speechless. Shish. He had never seen such conviction from anyone before. This boy, Naruto, who she barely knew, promised to help her achieve her dreams. Really? She bashfully asked. Naruto just nodded his head rapidly, in a serious manner. Of course. The blonde pumped his fist out towards her. Now, he started, thinking for a moment. He suddenly rubbed the back of his head, sheepishly. How do we do it? He had an apologetic grin. With his eyes closed, he didn't really know how to help. Satsuki hung her head down in despair. Idiot, she muttered quietly, but Naruto could still hear her clearly. Instead of retorting to her insult, he maturely stuck his tongue out at the girl. She used her hand to cover up a giggle. Naruto smiled, pleased to make her laugh. Satsuki sighed sadly. I don't know. She admitted. I just have to get my two-san to recognize me as a shinobi, just like my ni-san. She passionately stated. Naruto, once again, blinked in confusion. Ni-san. He heard her mention a brother, but didn't really know about him. Satsuki's eyes brightened at the chance to talk about her brother. My ni-san is amazing. She proudly said, looking up with a smile on her face. He's already joining Anbu. And he only turns 12 next month. Naruto's eyes widened. The Anbu, like dog, are supposed to be really strong. Wow, he's already that strong. Naruto breathed out in amazement. Satsuki nodded with a smile. Obviously proud to be Itachi's sister. Yup. She puffed out her chest again. He's said to be a talent like the Yondaime. Naruto's ears perked up at the mention of his favorite Hokage. Satsuki continued singing her brother's praises. Itachi ni is already really strong. She suddenly stood up and stared with determination at the shorter blonde, but I am going to surpass him. And fulfill my dreams, she exclaimed, smiling brightly at the boy, who mirrored the grin back at her. He gave her a big thumbs up. I believe you can surpass your brother as well. Satsuki's eyes widened at the boy, who didn't notice and went on, I mean you're awesome datbayo. He passionately declared to the frozen girl, whoever this Itachi guy is must be lucky to have you as a sister. Satsuki couldn't move. I mean you're funny, nice, he listed the words off on his fingers, you're all really pretty, he mumbled with a blush on his face. Satsuki's wide eyes began brimming with tears. She couldn't breathe as he continued to praise her. All her life, she has been viewed as the second to everything. Even if covertly, she always felt looked down on by her clan, being considered Itachi's little sister, or Fugaku-sama's youngest. Never viewed as Satsuki, other than by her immediate family, never treated seriously in her ambitions to surpass the prodigy, always coddled like a princess and not a shinobi. Yet this boy, who she just met, is giving her his faith to fulfill her dreams. She had never seen so much confidence in someone's words. He sounded like he genuinely believed she would surpass Itachi. While others would be nice to her, they always assumed she would set her expectations low, wanting to merely be a housewife or mother, but she wanted to be a strong shinobi and help lead the clan in the future. The only ones to truly acknowledge her dreams are her brother and mother, but Satsuki can tell they have hidden skepticism as well, which broke her heart. Naruto, however, has 100% faith in her dreams. She gave him a watery smile, and suddenly jumped towards him and hugged him tightly, causing the 6-year-old boy to stiffen immediately. He hardly ever had physical contact with others. Thank you, Naruto. The raven-haired girl whispered. Naruto nodded slowly, and gently hugged her in return. The two separate with slightly reddened faces, feeling a little awkward from their brief hug. They both go back to lying down in the shade under the tree. Satsuki glanced over at Naruto, who looked close to falling asleep. His whiskers are pretty cute. She mentally giggled. It was odd seeing someone have a feral look like him, but she liked it. That's when Satsuki got back to why she was here in the first place. Naruto. Satsuki asked the boy gently, causing Naruto to tilt his head in her direction, before nodding. Back on the main street, I saw you getting, looks. Naruto quickly started to panic at that. He had only just gotten along with this girl. Maybe her parents weren't there to tell her that he was a bad influence, and that was the only reason she was still here. So he tried to play ignorant. I don't know what you're talking about. Naruto answered innocently. Satsuki merely puffed out her cheeks, before playfully poking him. I saw you. She poked the boy at each word, receiving mock whines of pain from the blonde in response. Why did they look at you like that? Satsuki seemed to get angry at the thought of Naruto receiving those looks she saw, even if she didn't know why he got them. Naruto looked into Satsuki's eyes. And he could tell that her anger was towards the villagers. This caused something warm to blossom in the boy's chest. He didn't know what a friend was, but maybe he would be able to consider Satsuki one. After all, she actually talked and laughed with him. So Naruto decides, if Satsuki can tell him her problems, he can trust Satsuki with his. He stared down with sad eyes and fidgeting slightly, getting a worried look from the girl beside him. Ever since I can remember, I've been getting stares from people. He started sadly. People just look down at me with such hatred. The blonde boy's lips quivered as he spoke. Naruto's breathing quickened as he continued to talk. I don't know why, but they just keep looking at me with those eyes. It took all his willpower to prevent any tears from appearing in his eyes as he is reminded of his greatest nightmare of loneliness. They follow me everywhere I go. I don't know what I did to deserve those stares. Naruto progressively got louder as he talked, and he could stop a few tears from falling down his eyes as his frail body began to shake. He didn't know why exactly he chose to show his genuine emotions to Satsuki. He never showed them to anyone before, but he felt a connection to her. A feeling where he could trust himself to open up to the girl, even if he hardly knew her. That feeling proved to be true when he felt a pair of arms encase him in another tight hug. He felt himself go rigid, still not used to getting a hug by anyone other than Ayame. Satsuki copied what her mother would do to her whenever she would cry for whatever reason, be it from Itachi lying about playing and blowing her off, or her father ignoring her. She rubbed his back gently and placed his shaking head in the crook of her neck, allowing him to cry out his sorrows. Not even an hour ago, Naruto was contemplating leaving the village because he couldn't find any proper attachment to Konoha, yet he suddenly feels connected to this pretty, black-haired girl he just met. It allows him to escape from the loneliness and despair of his life and the hatred from the people in the village. Unaware of Naruto, Satsuki felt a similar attachment to him. It lets her momentarily forget about her responsibilities in the clan, and she doesn't feel like she's trapped in Itachi's shadow here. They both felt completely content and peaceful. Unbeknownst to each other, they both had genuine smiles on their faces. I hope we can be friends, they simultaneously thought. Naruto pulled away from the hug after a few minutes, the tears now dried away. But he still had red, puffy eyes. Once again, the two looked away from one another, having matching blushes on their faces. Satsuki takes a moment before asking, "Are you alright, Naruto?" To which the boy nods with a smile. "Why yeah, I'm feeling better." His voice was still a little rough from crying, but she could understand perfectly, as she nodded. Satsuki was about to ask another question when she noticed the position of the sun. It's already that close to 3. Realizing she needs to be home very soon, or her mother will scold her badly. She turned to her friend, Naruto. He turned to look at her and said, Satsuki apologetically looked at him. "I'm sorry, but I have to go home now." She saw the downhearted expression on Naruto's face, and quickly reassured him, "Don't worry." She said with a smile, "We can see each other again. If you want," she excitedly said, but had a bit of hesitation at the end, a little self-conscious about whether Naruto would actually want to spend more time with her. Naruto looked surprised. While Satsuki was feeling self-conscious about herself, Naruto was feeling self-conscious about whether Satsuki would want to actually spend more time with him. Are you sure?" he asked timidly. Satsuki nodded rapidly with a smile. "Yep. Where can you meet?" the Uchiha asked, wanting to know a place to meet her friend. Naruto closed his eyes and rubbed his chin in a thoughtful expression. Satsuki thought he looked funny when he tried to look serious. Naruto wondered for a moment. "I don't know if I can take her to the Uzu Cove. Maybe the other place." He looked at the patient girl and grinned. "What about the top of the Hokage mountain? After lunchtime?" he asked hopefully. Satsuki wondered if she would be allowed to leave then. Her mother was giving her more freedom around now, and Itachi would be joining that new position, so he would sadly be absent a lot more. She nodded happily, allowing her spiky black frames to bounce up and down. "Okay." Satsuki called out, "I'll see you tomorrow," she said as she started skipping away, waving back at the sad but grinning blonde. He doesn't want Satsuki to leave yet. But he guessed she has a family, at least he had something to look forward to. But then she turned around and happily said, "I can't wait to tell my Ka-san about you." She shouted cheerfully. But Naruto started to become alarmed. What if her mom stops us from meeting again? Naruto didn't want to lose his first friend before he actually found out more about her. He remembered all the other parents. "Wait, Satsuki." He ran up towards the confused Uchiha. "What is it?" she questioned, tilting her head to the side. Naruto was still huffing from running to catch up to her. "Can why you not tell your Ka-chan?" He softly pleaded. Satsuki blinked at the request but her eyes widened as she remembered those looks. She shook her head quickly. My mom isn't like that. She defended Makoto. But Naruto still had that nervous look in his eyes, so she sighed. Fine. The boy released a breath of relief and gave a quick thank you to the girl. I'll see you tomorrow, Naruto. She called out again, as she ran back towards the Uchiha compound, hopefully not getting there too late. Naruto merely smiled in the direction his friend ran off to, before making his way back to his apartment. He was clearly in a better mood now than when he entered the academy. A friend, huh? He thought with a big face-splitting grin. The next day, Satsuki saw Naruto sitting on the head of the Yondaime Hokage. He was wearing a pair of green goggles and a black shirt with a red swirl in the center. When he heard her, his eyes lit up in happiness. Suki! He shouted in joy, actually surprised the girl came today. The Uchiha smiled brightly in return before jumping down gracefully from the cliff to join him on the stone head. Hi Naruto. Satsuki greeted him. The boy just grinned and surprised her by grabbing her hand and guiding them to the edge of the cliff. Look! The blonde called out happily, while pointed to the view of the village before them. Whoa! Satsuki whispered, awestruck. She's never been up here before. And seeing the village from above put the size into perspective. Her dark eyes scanning the horizon, astonished seeing her homeland from this angle and height. Doesn't it make you feel small? Naruto asked with a smile, still staring out at the village. Satsuki tilted her head to the side, causing her long black hair to fall to the side. Small? She asked, confused. Naruto nodded with a melancholy smile. He pointed down towards the busy village below them, were so tiny compared to the rest of the village, and the world, Ibeo. Dramatically gesturing to the sky. He repeated the same thing the Hokage told him by the campfire, when they first met. Satsuki nodded, absent-mindedly. When he put it like that, they were really small. So, is that why you want to be Hokage? The blonde looked at her. She pointed down at the stone head below them, so you can get your big head on the monument. The Uchiha smirked as she teased him. Naruto gave her a foxy grin while scratching the back of his head. Well, that's one of the reasons, he said sheepishly. The girl rolled her black eyes playfully. Naruto's face then morphed into a content look. They seen how the Hokage gets all this love and respect from the people in the village, and if I can get that hat, he smiled optimistically while looking down at the village, maybe they'll look at me the same way, ya know. Satsuki stares at Naruto with speechless awe, because she really respected his determination towards his goal. Though as she thought of it, something about Naruto's goal didn't sit right with her. And it made her remember her original question about why he smiles when they look at him. She couldn't believe he wanted to get those people's respect. Why? She whispered. Naruto raised an eyebrow in her direction. So she elaborated, why do you want to get respect from people that look at you that way? Her black brows furrowed, obviously unhappy. Naruto just looked at her oddly. Because if I get their respect, they will acknowledge me and notice me. He said it like it was obvious. Satsuki started to glare at the boy, who flinched back a bit. Why? She raised her voice. Why do you need to gain their acknowledgement? You said they've been mean to you all your life. Why do you have to earn their respect when you've gone nothing to be treated this way? Why don't you want revenge? The two 6-year-olds were both shocked. Naruto from how angry Satsuki was and Satsuki from what came out of her own mouth. Satsuki didn't know why it came out, but she gets ally passionate about the people she cares about. From seeing Naruto in that crowd and receiving so much scorn and hate from those around him, and for him to simply brush it off made her angry. Angry at the people for giving Naruto those glares and whispers, and also angry at Naruto for just accepting them without retaliating. Revenge? Naruto hesitantly asked the girl. Naruto doesn't really understand the concept of the word, and hopes that Satsuki can explain it. Satsuki nodded, seriously, after calming down a bit. Why don't you want to get payback on them and show them how they treat you? Naruto's blue eyes widened at the thought of releasing his resentment towards the village. Why would I want revenge? Naruto is horrified to think of himself letting his anger towards the village. From the fuming look of the girl, he could tell she looked ready to breathe fire. Why not? she shouted, wanting to know his justification for simply accepting their hatred. Naruto doesn't even hesitate to answer. What would be the point? Satsuki stared at him, jaw slackened, as he merely shrugged his shoulders and continued, I want to be better than these people. Even if I prank all the time, I still don't want to hurt him. Ya no. He looked down, seemingly in his own world, but Satsuki was still listening. I want their acknowledgement because I feel that they aren't bad people, just confused. He clenched his fists and locked his determined, blue eyes with shocked onyx. I want to prove them wrong about me, that I am not a nuisance, and that I am a person too. He began raising his voice to the speechless girl. That I'm Naruto Uzumaki. And I will become Hokage one day. Naruto passionately declared. His grin returned in full force, and the Uchiha beside him couldn't help but smile softly at the boy. His optimism is truly remarkable. To be able to endure that hate with a smile on his face just shows how pure-hearted he is. While Satsuki doesn't like to admit it, Naruto has a stronger will than her. She knew she would have cracked under those stares, yet he stands firm and wants to get their acceptance. While the girl doesn't agree with his reasons, as she doesn't think the villagers deserve Naruto's efforts, she acknowledges his dream and goals, so she nodded in acceptance. I guess you're right, she admitted, causing Naruto to listen intently, I'm sorry. She bowed slightly. Just like her parents taught her when she needed to apologize, Naruto immediately gets embarrassed, still not used to being treated with etiquette. I shouldn't have spoken out against your dream. Please forgive me, she softly asked, that stopped when she felt a finger poke her forehead. Her head immediately snapped up in shock from the same gesture her brother uses on her. Though instead of seeing Itachi, she saw a blushing blonde. There's nothing to worry about. He sheepishly reassures her, while frantically waving his hands in front of him in a forgiving gesture. His cheeks still tinted red in embarrassment. Satsuki nodded hesitantly, before realizing this is Naruto. He isn't someone who gets angry at others, so the girl gave him a closed-eye smile. So, Satsuki said, looking to move on the conversation, what do you want to talk about? She asked the boy beside her, who in response, puts on his thinking face. We can talk about what we do for fun, he offered, as the two of them sat down and leaned against the rock. Satsuki nodded with a smile. The Uchiha and the Uzumaki went on an hour-long discussion about their favorite things to do, from pranking, gardening, and sealing, to shuriken jutsu, hide-and-seek, and taking walks. They moved on to talking about what they look forward to from the academy next month. They separated after their discussion to go back to their respective homes. Both left with smiles on their faces. It has been a week since Naruto and Satsuki first met, and they have met up every day since at the top of the Hokage monument. Her family have been curious as to why she would leave the house for an hour or two after lunchtime, but she just said that she wanted to go for a walk in the woods, a common thing for her to do around the Uchiha compound. They decided to respect her privacy. True to her word, Satsuki kept her meetings with Naruto secret from her family. While she wanted to introduce him to them, the young girl could tell that Naruto was quite self-conscious about his treatment, even if he tries to hide it. Satsuki still doesn't understand why Naruto is hated so much. The boy told her about his love for pranks and how he performs them to get scowled or any attention, saying it's better than getting whispers behind his back. He actually said he started doing pranks because of the treatment. So the pranks weren't the cause of his scorn. The blonde told her that he was the one to do that prank that kept her father at work over lunchtime. She hit him for that, much to his confusion. But other than pranking, the boy was as clueless as her about what he did to deserve the people's hatred. It infuriated her to see Naruto get chewed out for no apparent reason. Even if they didn't meet each other in public, she would sometimes follow him for a bit, to see if he still gets glared at. She definitely wasn't a stalker or anything. Just curious. Back to the matter of her family, Itachi was getting suspicious. But he knew she was safe, so he left it be, for now. Her parents weren't shinobi for nothing, and could tell she was lying about going for a walk. They just said for her to stay safe and come home after an hour or two, or else they'd send a police force member to search for her. Itachi had left this morning to head towards the Anbu headquarters for his first day. Fugaku was held up at work again and Makoto went to help him. This gave Satsuki the house to herself, something she didn't enjoy. While she would like to be alone sometimes, she loves getting attention from her family. Her onyx eyes quietly lit up at the reminder that she would meet with her best friend again today. Yes, best friend. Over the week, Satsuki had given it some thoughts and she definitely considers Naruto her best friend. Believe it or not, Satsuki doesn't really have many friends. Her aura makes her mostly unapproachable for kids her age from outside the clan, but she has a few Uchiha girls she plays with from time to time. Naruto's happy and kind personality is really welcoming, but she also likes his competitive nature. That is what really makes Naruto stick out from the other kids she's met. The blonde wears his heart on his sleeve and shows his true feelings. He isn't afraid to cry in front of her, unlike others. She does get annoyed at times with the fact he always smiles through the neglect he receives from the village. He merely says, "I have to win their acknowledgement, and become Hokage." Today she was very excited though. Naruto said he had somewhere to show her, a secret place he goes that is really pretty. So the Uchiha made 2 bentos for both herself and Naruto, and set out towards the Hokage monument. Hokage monument. Stood restlessly on the top of the Hokage monument was Naruto Uzumaki. He was pacing back and forth, nervously waiting for the arrival of his best friend. This had probably been the greatest week of the young blonde's life. Each day after lunch, he would meet with the female Uchiha on top of the Hokage monument. They would talk about all kinds of things and learn more about each other. Apparently when she's older, Satsuki's eyes turn red. He really likes her black eyes though. So he hopes it doesn't happen anytime soon. Naruto would talk to Satsuki about his pranks, as well as how he can make seals. Satsuki was awestruck by the fact Naruto could make such cool things. Even if he wasn't very good at other stuff. Satsuki swore she would catch up and learn all kinds of fire jutsu and shuriken jutsu. Naruto knows that Satsuki is a lot smarter than he is. Using words he doesn't understand and being able to do things he can't. She already knows taijutsu stances. He's already calling her his rival for the future. Satsuki seems to agree, and they have gotten very competitive in their conversations about trivial things, as well as some physical fights. While Satsuki is a lot more elegant and agile in her movement due to her body shape and weight. Naruto is a lot more sturdy and is stronger than Satsuki despite being shorter. His physical form gives him an advantage over the girl, though he does have some unpredictable movements that can catch Satsuki off guard. Satsuki is currently winning in their fights, much to Naruto's dismay and the Uchiha's elation. For the last couple of days, Satsuki has started to bring wrapped up bentos as lunch for him. They were really good meals, full of rice, meat, and vegetables which he usually doesn't like. It was really nice of Satsuki to make them for him. It started after she found out he only ate cup ramen and ichirakus. It also saved some of his allowance. When she found out about his ramen-only diet, she promptly whacked him across the head. Lecturing him about, "You'll sta. Why short forever if you only eat that trash? Idiot." Naruto maturely turned his head away from her with a pout, letting out a "hn." This led to another of their physical fights. Satsuki won. The two of them have gotten quite comfortable around each other now. They would have playful jokes with one another and began to use nicknames. Satsuki stuck to her original impression of the boy, and referred to him as idiot, while Naruto picked up a word he heard on the streets, to call her a bastard. She fumed red at the nickname at first, but now she just gets annoyed. Aside from their small skirmishes, Naruto and Satsuki have gotten along really well. She would always listen intently to his stories, and laugh along with him at his pranks and jokes he makes. He would also listen to her tales, cheer her up when she told him about her problems, and they would simply cherish each other's company. Naruto had promised he would show the Yuzu Cove to Satsuki today, something he was very nervous about. It sort of slipped into one of their conversations that Naruto revealed he has a secret place he likes to go. Satsuki started pestering him to tell her where he goes, and he finally relented by letting he'd let her come to the Yuzu Cove with her. She thanked him greatly with a big hug, obviously happy to see this hidden place. When he asked why she was so insistent to go to the Yuzu Cove, she said, with Itachi ni joining Anbu. I would have much to do around the compound. I wanna spend more time with you at this secret hiding spot. Satsuki gave him a big smile, which he returned. That said, he was still nervous. No one other than him has been to the hidden waterfall area he found a year ago, and he has told no one about it. He has been there almost every day for the last year, and that's where he practices his seals and calligraphy. So to have an outsider come to his safe haven made him feel a little anxious, but he reminded himself that Satsuki is his best friend and he trusts her more than anyone. His thoughts get interrupted by the sound of running coming from the stairs that lead up the mountain. He turns around to see Satsuki jogging towards him waving her arm. "Hey, Naruto," the Uchiha happily called out. Running up the boy with her black hair bouncing behind her. Naruto grinned at her and replied, "Hey Suki." They both got down onto the head to overlook the village, sitting down on the rock of Minato Namikaze. Satsuki handed over the wrapped box to him. "Here," she called out. Naruto undid the wrapping to see a bento for him, and his blue eyes brightened at the sign of the food. He opened the box to see the goods. His mouth began to water at the sight of lunch. "Wow," he drooled, while reaching to take the chopsticks, "it looks so good." He complimented the blushing girl beside him, who was also opening up her bento. Thank you." Satsuki wasn't used to compliments about her cooking. "My Ka-san has been teaching me how to cook." Naruto nodded absent-mindedly, before lifting his chopsticks up. "Thank you for the food," he called out, using the standard phrase of thanks before eating, before greedily digging into the lunch. Satsuki gave a softer thanks before she started eating as well, but at a modest pace than Naruto and eating with more formality. A black eyebrow began twitching in annoyance at Naruto's improper eating. "Slow down," she called out to the blonde, who stopped his chewing to tilt his head at her, curiously. He still had rice on his face. Satsuki sighed, "It's not a race. You'll choke if you eat too fast." The girl lectured the boy, who nodded with a sheepish grin. Ayame told him the same thing. Sorry, Suki." He apologized with a slightly red face. Satsuki giggled at his blush, she really likes it when he gets embarrassed. Her chortle made his blush grow, as well as make Satsuki's laugh louder. The two fell into comfortable silence as they continued to eat their bento at a relaxing pace, both overlooking the village. They had finished their bento when Naruto jumped to his feet and slammed his fist into his palm. "Okay." He grinned as he turned to face Satsuki, who got up as well. "Ready to go?" he asked, referring to the Uzu Cove. Satsuki nodded rapidly with a megawatt smile, excited to see her best friend's favorite spot. They both climbed up the rock to get on the mountainside, and Naruto grabbed Satsuki's hand. He looked back and grinned foxily at the red-faced girl. "Let's go," he exclaimed, excitedly as he dragged his blushing friend. Wait. Her protests didn't reach Naruto's ears, as he laughed happily while leading the both of them to the west forest on the outskirts of the village. Uzu Cove. Satsuki was stunned, as Naruto navigated them through a complex path, with many tight passages that grown adults couldn't fit though. They came across the Uzumaki's sanctuary. She was speechless as she took in the environment. There was a large waterfall coming down from high above in the forest, likely a part of the Naka River, that would fall into a large pond, similar to the Waterfall of Truth. The wildlife was wonderful as well, vast plants and animals, loads of koi fish swimming in the crystal clear pond that the waterfall comes into, and lush, green grass that essentially breathes life. Trees of all colors and textures, pink sakura trees, beautiful cherry blossoms swaying in the wind, yellow maple trees. Golden leaves falling signifying the end of summer, cleanly cut bonsai trees situated around the edges of the clearing, obvious that Naruto tended them regularly, and the tall bamboo trees surrounding the area, hiding it completely. It is a natural paradise, more beautiful than anything Satsuki has seen before. Naruto has brought in some new additions over the last year he has spent at the cove. With some of the surrounding wood, he made a campfire that can easily cook his hunted food. There is also another rock-made table that Naruto made, just for his sealing practice. He got some inspiration from the clan compounds he pranked for some other extra stuff. Using the survival tips he picked up when he was hunting for food sometimes, he cut down a thin bamboo tree and used the wood and some rope to make a small torii gate at the front of the pond, nothing fancy, just to look cool. He used some pranking paint to make it red and even more awesome. Something else he picked up on from a clan compound was rock writing. Some compounds would have phrases carved into a stone tablet, so he did the same. He currently has 2 stones carved with Uzumaki and Naruto on either side of the Torii Gate, giving it a mystical, shrine-like vibe. What is different from a year ago is also the size of the hideout. At first, Naruto thought it was just a tiny area with a waterfall. But after exploring the area and removing all excess branch waste, it turns out there is close to an acre of land hidden in the clearing. That's like a miniature training ground. It was almost like Mother Nature wanted to hide the place, and opened it up to Naruto. Only a narrow entrance of bamboo trees to the left of the waterfall let Naruto and Satsuki in, all the other areas surrounding the clearing were sealed off with trees too thick to cut through, even for a wind manipulation master. Naruto used the expanded training area to put up handmade target boards and tree stumps to practice taijutsu. He hasn't acquired any kunais or shurikens yet, but when he starts the academy he will. He has only mastered the storage scroll so far, but he hopes to pan out to more advanced sealing techniques. Satsuki was still staring speechlessly at the terrain when Naruto spoke. "What do you think?" he asked the raven-haired girl, as she got out of her thoughts. It's amazing, Naruto," she whispered in awe. Naruto scratched the back of his head, embarrassed. "I know, right?" he agreed, before running into a bush nearby to pick out some flowers he grew. He ran back to the girl with a handful of pretty flowers. "Here." He presented the flowers to his best friend, who started blushing up a storm at the gift. In Naruto's hand were 10 red roses. While Naruto was oblivious to the meaning of flowers, Satsuki knew that red roses were the symbol for love and romance. She has already had a few annoying boys her age and older, including Kenshin, present her with red roses as a way to convey their feelings. She would always harshly turn them down, with no intention of accepting their gift. In front of her stood Naruto, who had an innocent, foxy grin on his face. For all she knew, Naruto had no idea what the flowers meant. Thank you, Naruto." She hesitantly took them from him. Naruto nodded with a grin and a thumbs up. "I didn't know what your favorite color is, so I just picked red, because of your Shishargangan," he admits with a smile. Satsuki mirrors the smile, coming to the conclusion that Naruto didn't know what flower symbolism was. "I love red." She sniffed the roses, and looked up at Naruto. "And it's called a Sharingan." Satsuki corrected the name of her bloodline. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. He probably should have remembered the name by now. He started walking towards the Torii Gate in front of the waterfall. But Naruto turned around to see Satsuki give him a pointed look. He gulped even though he didn't do anything wrong. Satsuki can be really scary when she is mad. "Why yes?" he asked the girl, whose eyes darkened slightly. "Don't give red roses to anyone else," she darkly muttered. Naruto felt a shiver down his spine at her tone. "Understand." Naruto's mouth agape, but he nodded slowly. Satsuki seemed angry about something, and he didn't want to get beat up again. "He has a bunch of different colored flowers." Her darkened features suddenly lit up again as she smiled at Naruto. "Great," she beamed, before skipping up to Torii Gate. Naruto remained still. He blinked in confusion at his friend's mood change. "Girls are weird." He shook his head before following Satsuki to the gate. Naruto gave the girl a quick tour around the cove and the clearing. She grinned at the sight of the target boards. "I'll bring kunais the next time I come here." Naruto looked towards her, as she continued, "Nisan taught me how to hit the bullseye, so I can teach you." Naruto's eyes widened before grinning and pumping his fist towards her. Satsuki looked down at the fist in confusion. "And I'll spar with you." He felt his blood pump in excitement and the thought of his skills getting better on his quest to be Hokage. "And I'll show you how to seal stuff." Satsuki smiled in return before following Naruto's lead and softly pumping her fist with his. They released their fist pump with Naruto smugly saying, "But don't F." All behind, Satsuki narrowed her eyes to see Naruto putting his hands behind his head with a mock patronizing look on his face. "Who knows? I'm probably a better kunai thrower than Itachi." Satsuki scoffed and turned her head from him. She grunted, still looking away from Naruto, "You don't even know what a kunai looks like." Naruto grumbled, "Of course I do." Satsuki turned to raise an eyebrow at the boy, as if to tell him. "Go on. It's that four-sided spinning thing. Idiot. That's a shuriken." Naruto blushed but didn't let up. "It's the same thing." Satsuki slapped her hand on her face, "They are completely different." Quote. Naruto pointed at the target in front of them, "They're both metal and you throw 'em. You really are an idiot." Idiot. At least I'm not a bastard. Bastard. Lightning sparked between the two before they tackled each other and began another round of their fight in the clearing. Satsuki arrived home an hour later, with empty bento boxes and her bouquet of red roses from Naruto. She smiled as she looked down at roses, with a slight blush on her face. Naruto and her both finished fighting after about 10 minutes, when they both barreled into the pond filled with koi fish. They started laughing about it and got dried off fast in the summer heat in the clearing. After getting dry, Satsuki found that she needed to get home before her mother to avoid questions about why she smelled like fish. She took her roses and put them in a vase for her room, as a nice reminder of her time with her best friend, excited about the prospect of going back to the Uzu Cove again soon. Naruto got back to his apartment with a smile on his face. His nervousness about showing off his safe haven had vanished, as he couldn't wait to see Satsuki again. The more time he spends with Satsuki, the more the emptiness in his heart starts to fill up with love and comfort. His relationship with Satsuki proves that he has a hope in winning the respect of people, especially after she acknowledged his dream. Her mere presence makes Naruto feel at peace. At the same time it gives him a responsibility. He remembered the old man telling him about how the Hokage protects the village with their lives. Being with Satsuki makes him want to protect her just like a Hokage should protect its people. This increases his determination tenfold, not just for himself, but for his best friend. 2 weeks later. Itachi is not a genius for nothing. He can tell exactly when his little sister lies to him or not. He is the master of telling lies, after all. For the past 3 weeks, SATs. UKI has been a lot happier and more open. Even when he has to softly deny her requests for things with a poke on the forehead, she accepted it and was less downcast. Sometimes she would even skip away. He knows this is directly related to her after-lunch trips she has started taking for 3 hours a day, ever since she went skirt shopping 3 weeks ago. Today is his day off from the Anbu duties and it is a well-needed break. Only 2 weeks into his new assignment, and both the clan and the village sides are taking their toll on him. Being the clan's pipeline to the Hokage's actions, in order to warn the clan about any threats to their plans, also being indirectly told by Hokage-sama and Danzo-sama to keep an eye out for the Uchiha is starting to make him go crazy. The teenager has been introduced to Kakashi-senpai and the rest of Team RO. He now has the codename Weasel. Itachi slept in for his day off, waking up around lunchtime to the smell of grilled fish and fried rice. He sighed as his stomach grumbled. Clearly he was hungrier than he thought. Definitely better than rations. He mumbled to himself, as he made his way downstairs to see his little sister working on some fish and rice. He raised his eyebrow at the sight. As far as he knew, Satsuki didn't like cooking. Their mother apparently went to the shops to get some groceries, so Satsuki used up what was available. "What are you doing?" Itachi queried. From right behind her, causing his sister to jump out of her skin. Itachi was clearly amused by her inability to sense him, as he smirked at her frightened reaction. "Ni-san, stop doing that." It was definitely not the first time Itachi caught her off guard, and won't be the last. "Doing what?" he innocently asked. His sister just grumbled in response, "Cousin." A chuckle to come from Itachi as he walked up to pat her on the head. Itachi ignored her cute glare and just said, "You just need better awareness of your surroundings." He cheekily replied, poking her forehead. Satsuki attempted and failed to swat the hand away before releasing a HN and returning to her cooking. Itachi looked at what she was cooking and narrowed his eyes. Koi fish. As far as he knew, their mother doesn't buy koi fish from the market, and Satsuki wouldn't be caught dead fishing for the koi fish in their backyard pond. So what was Satsuki doing with a grilled koi fish? "Satsuki?" he asked. Said girl turned and nodded with a, "Yeah." Itachi pointed down at the fish. "Have you recently gone fishing?" He noticed her black eyes widen slightly. "It's just that we don't buy that type of fish." He attempted to play ignorant to let her open up. Satsuki was caught in two minds. After these 3 weeks with Naruto, she quickly realized that she didn't want anyone in her family to know about her spending time with him. It wasn't that she was ashamed of introducing the blonde to her family, she has got quite possessive of Naruto over the time with him, and she doesn't want to share him with anyone else. It was also the fact that it was secret, and she always wanted to keep one. Itachi and her parents always keep things from her, so as revenge, she will keep her meeting with Naruto secret. Yet it seems that Itachi is beginning to piece it all together. Especially with her recently going koi fishing with Naruto in the pond in the Yuzuyu Cove. Why yeah, she nodded, emptying to think of an excuse. I went to the dock along the Naka River and caught a koi fish. Satsuki mentally patted herself on the back for the excuse. Itachi nodded with a smile, I see. His sister beamed up at him, well. Nicely done. Satsuki blushed at the praise and nodded happily, before returning to turn the fish, humming a happy tone. She was oblivious to Itachi's internal thoughts. There are no koi fish by that dock. He narrowed his black eyes. That is the traditional training place where Uchiha children gain their rite of passage in the clan with the fireball jutsu. The Anbu agent closed his eyes and crossed his arms. The water temperature around that area is too high due to the constant fire chakra released there. It would scare off any koi fish. He looked at the back of his happy 6-year-old sibling. What are you hiding, Satsuki? By the end of the day, Itachi noticed Satsuki would do some odd things. The young girl would ask Makoto if she knew anything about Fuinjutsu. To which their mother said a late friend was a master, but she never learned much. Satsuki would zone out when they were walking through the compound, even when they were being bowed to by the other Uchihas. Satsuki even asked him if he wanted to go to that ramen stand near the center of the village. Another thing that made Itachi curious and slightly nervous was their earlier interaction with Itachi's friend, who they met in the park in the afternoon. Flashback. Itachi was once again carrying Satsuki on his back, who got sore legs from their taijutsu practice in the forest. Ey were currently walking around the quiet park of Uchiha in the mid-afternoon. Satsuki groaned into Itachi's back, why are you so strong, Ni-san? She mumbled the question. I just practiced a lot. He vaguely answered. Satsuki banged her forehead into the back of his neck. OWW, he drly said from the assault of his sister, you've gotten strong too. Satsuki looked up at him. Quote, you could have hit me on a couple of instances. He praised her, but the girl just growled quietly. You were using only one hand. She pointed out, deadpanned. Itachi had the decency to look a little sheepish. This is so unfair. She whined under her breath, but Itachi heard her. What's unfair? He asked. Satsuki looked at him with a slightly quivering lip, making the Anbu a little nervous. I'm only joining the academy next week. And why you already graduated at the age of 7? Satsuki, once again, feeling so far off from surpassing Itachi. I need to get strong and graduate in the end next year if I have any hope of getting stronger than you, Satsuki mumbled to herself, reciting her goal of surpassing Itachi. She was shocked when Itachi lowered her to the ground and made her walk for herself. She winced slightly from the soreness in her legs and looked up to see Itachi staring down at her with slightly hardened eyes, which made her gulp. No, he firmly said, putting a hand on Satsuki's shoulder. The girl was still looking up with her big, onyx eyes. And no, she asked her brother, who shook his head and crouched down to her eye level. No, stop putting yourself through this, he told the girl, as he stared into her watery eyes. You and I are different, we have grown up separate ways, and experienced different childhoods. Satsuki just remained silent as her brother lectured her. I was only in the academy for a year before I was put into the shinobi forces. He admitted to the girl, who looked down. She knew that she should be that level as well. She was shocked when Itachi lifted her chin up to make her stare at him. It was a big mistake. The girl's eyes widened at what Itachi said. Itachi put a hand up to stop her questioning as he continued, I was just a 7-year-old boy. And I had to start experiencing the life of an adult. Itachi was thinking back to his days as a genin and having the weight of expectation put on his tiny shoulders. It's an OT that I didn't learn all I could at the academy, because I did. He admitted, I was ahead of the other kids in the age groups above me, so I was made a shinobi from early on with some older kids. Itachi remembers his old teammates Tenma and Shinko in Team 2. This boy in my team, Tenma, was quite a boasty boy, but didn't have the skills to back it up. He said fondly about his late friend. Satsuki giggled at that. She got the instant reminder of Naruto, who is also all talk, especially with kunai throwing. Itachi's fond face morphed into a sad one, which made his sister worry. When I joined my team, I was cocky. He admitted his arrogance. Satsuki was surprised that her brother acted like that. He is always so humble at home. Being considered a prodigy and graduating several years early definitely inflated my ego, making me think those around were inferior to me. Itachi sighed at the reminder, but as time went on, my team went on a mission where we were ambushed by a powerful shinobi. Tenma came in front to protect me and the team, but he wasn't strong enough. He looked down to the ground, remembering Tenma's sacrifice. He didn't make it. Satsuki gasped, as she knew that meant he died. Itachi held onto Satsuki's shoulders and looked her dead in the eye, as she looked back in stunned silence. The intensity and seriousness in her brother's eyes were completely different from his usual stoic face. The point is, he began. Rushing through the academy isn't always good. We're thankfully at a momentary peace right now, with no need to send children to war. Nked God that there was no war for his sister to witness. I have all the hope in the world that you will outlearn all you need to in the academy early on, but keeping your childhood intact is more important than starting missions before you even become a teenager. Satsuki slowly nodded her head, finally understanding what her brother wanted. You will surpass me, little sister. The girl looked stunned at her brother. As he continued with a soft smile, but not everything happens overnight. He poked her forehead and both siblings smiled at one another. Satsuki did a mock pout for the poke bee. Uchi knew it was more affectionate than anything else. Before Satsuki could speak again, they heard footsteps rapidly approaching them, and they turned to see a brunette girl who was Itachi's age. He had dark eyes and a small mole under her right eye. The girl wore a purple, sleeveless shirt and displayed proudly on her forehead was a blue, Konoha headband. She came running up to them with a big smile on her face, waving at Itachi. Itachi-kun, I haven't seen you all summer. The girl pouted at her crush, who raised an eyebrow in response. Look, she pointed at her forehead with a smile, I graduated as well. She puffed out her chest, and beamed proudly. Itachi smiled at his childhood friend. Well done, Izumi. It was only a matter of time. He praised her, causing the girl in question to blush. Well, it's not quite Anbu. She trailed off, bashfully making circling in the dirt with her foot. I still have a long way to catch up to you and Shisui-san, she mumbled, downhearted. Izumi has known Itachi since before the Kyuubi attack, and has idolized him since. She is determined to get close to the strength he has. Izumi is only a half Uchiha, which is a rare occurrence for the clan. She became an official member after awakening her Sharingan at the age of 5, after witnessing the death of her non-Uchiha father during the Kyuubi attack. She was initially in the same academy class as Itachi. Before he jumped up the age groups, she started developing feelings for him then. Satsuki just looked on in confusion, as Itachi just smiled and shook his head, you will be great. The 12-year-old boy encouraged the girl who awakened her Sharingan before him, making Izumi look up at him with reddened cheeks. I'm just surprised you are not joining the police force. It was why common for Uchiha to join the military police force after graduating from the academy or after they became Chunin. He and Shisui were obvious exceptions, though even Shisui works for them from time to time. Izumi blushed in response. I will eventually, she admitted, maybe when I'm a Chunin. Izumi's timidness quickly vanished, as she jumped into Itachi's surprised grasp and gave him a tight, friendly hug. He hesitantly hugged back, I'll be catching up in no time. She beamed happily, her cheeks lighting up from her bold intimacy with her crush. Unseen to both Izumi and Satsuki, Itachi's face heated up in a rare instance of flusterness. Itachi isn't the most extroverted person, but he can't deny he does have some feelings for Izumi, something Shisui constantly teases him about. Our close moment stopped when a growl came from below the two teens' positions, causing them both to look down at the vexed 6-year-old. Satsuki narrowed her eyes and crossed her arms on her chest, and Oyed, this girl was taking her brother's attention away from her. She blinked in confusion though, when the girl's eyes sparkled in realization when she saw her. It turned to shock when the girl began to squish her cheeks and cooed over her. Satsuki-chan, Izumi called out, in delight. Look at how big you got. I haven't seen you since you were a baby. The brunette remembered trying to hold an infant Satsuki after the Kyuubi attack. But the baby wouldn't stop crying. Satsuki was frozen in place as this unknown girl started rubbing her cheek against her own pale cheek. You're so cute. Satsuki stayed motionless. As her cheek continued to get assaulted by this person, she glanced up to her amused brother, who was having trouble keeping from laughing. She silently pleaded for help, to which her brother, reluctantly, did. Izumi, Itachi said, causing the girl to stop her cooing to look at her crush. I think you should properly introduce yourself before doing that. He smirked at Satsuki's embarrassed face. Izumi suddenly looked very sheepish, rubbing the back of her head. Sorry Satsuki-chan, I shouldn't have done that to you. Izumi gave an apologetic grin, much like how Naruto does. Satsuki grunted and turned around, hiding her embarrassed face from the stranger. Itachi sighed at his sister's poor social skills, so he walked up to her and turned her to face Izumi. Satsuki, he started, the girl looked at him. Cheeks still red. This is my friend, Izumi. Satsuki looked up at the teen who was still smiling down at her. She is an Uchiha as well, and an aspiring kunoichi, just like you. Satsuki looked surprised at the girl, as she had a lot in common with her. Izumi then puffed out her cheeks in annoyance, with her hands on her hips. I'm not aspiring anymore, Itachi-kun. She whined maturely, pointing proudly at her headband. I'm a real kunoichi now. Itachi just smirked at the girl. Of course, but I assume you are still taking D-rank missions. Izumi's shiver at the mention of the missions was all he needed to know. Come back to me after you take a C rank or higher. The prodigy said, with a playful undertone. Izumi looked at him with fierce determination, intent on taking higher missions. Before Izumi could talk again, Satsuki gently bowed at her. Nice to meet you, Izumi-san. The younger girl said, showing off her etiquette. I am Satsuki Uchiha, youngest of Fugaku and Makoto. She narrated the introduction she had to say every time she met someone new of the clan. A poke of her forehead stopped her formal intro, as Itachi looked at her with an amused stare. You don't have to do that every time, Satsuki, she already knows you, as you found out earlier. He said, referencing the awkward interaction between the two female Uchihas. Satsuki pouted, while rubbing her sore forehead, you don't have to poke me every time either. She grumbled under her breath, but Itachi heard her and gave her a smirk, but didn't rebuke her statement. As it was true he liked to tease her constantly. It's what older brothers do. Wow, Satsuki turned to face awestruck Izumi, who was looking intently at her. You must be in the academy by now, right Satsuki-chan? Izumi remembered she and Itachi joined the academy at the age of 6, though the Sandame might have raised the starting age, due to the lack of war. Satsuki nodded with a timid smile. Still not very comfortable around new people, I'll be joining next week. She replied quickly, though both other kids could hear her excitement in her voice. Satsuki's facial expression showed he was really excited about joining the academy. Itachi mentally wondered what made her so much more thrilled about joining. Oh, you seem excited about the academy Satsuki-chan. Izumi's remark broke Itachi out of his thoughts. Satsuki had a slight blush at that, which caused the genin to smirk as she saw the look on Satsuki's face. I can tell from that look you have a special someone to go with. Both Itachi and Satsuki's eyes widened, for different reasons. Izumi didn't notice, so she went on, do you have a friend there for you? When Satsuki's cheeks light up, Izumi's eyes brighten in realization, a boyfriend. The 6-year-old's cheeks went atomic red with wide eyes. Was she that easy to read? Izumi had much experience with that look, as she had the same look around Itachi during the academy days. Just like all the other fangirls, Itachi had. Itachi stood as still as a statue as he processed what he just heard. Did his precious, innocent, foolish little sister have a boyfriend? At the age of 6. Without him knowing, the only boy that Itachi knew Satsuki interacted with was that brat Kenshin, but that was due to family ties, rather than Satsuki wanting to be there. Kenshin would just be desperate for Satsuki's attention and attempt to brag and gloat about stuff to make himself seem cool, but Itachi would rather stick a rusty kunai in his own eye than let Satsuki end up with that spoiled little shit. Satsuki rapidly shook her head to deny Izumi's assumption. No. She unintentionally shouted. I'm just excited to join the academy and catch up to Ni-san. She mentally cursed her stutter. As Izumi just smiled and nodded in acceptance. Izumi assumed that whatever Satsuki was hiding, she didn't want to reveal to Itachi, so she would respect the younger girl's privacy. With no intention of destroying their relationship just minutes after meeting, Izumi nodded in acknowledgement with a smile. That's a good dream. She ruffled her crush's sister's raven black hair, annoying the girl in the process. Why did everyone do that? Izumi ignored the pouting girl and continued to smile softly. I have a similar dream. Even if we're girls, we can be stronger than a housewife. Satsuki fiercely nodded in agreement. She was beginning to like this older girl. Thank you, Izumi-san. She beamed to Izumi, who grinned in acknowledgement, before turning her attention back to Itachi, who was just getting out of his stupor from whatever Izumi said earlier. He assumed that what Izumi said was a joke, but he still gets nervous with the mention of his sister and AB boy. It will be a cold day in hell before he so much as allows his sister to interact with male outside of basic camaraderie, unless they pass his test. Itachi-kun, Izumi started, bashfully. Do you want to get dango sometime? She remembered years ago when they shared some dango by the dock, and would like to do it again. Itachi smiled and gave the meek girl a nod. Of course, Izumi beamed in response. As Itachi continued, I can go with you tomorrow, after my squad training. He still has Anbu training, but he won't have a mission for a while longer. Izumi grinned. He ran up to Itachi to give him a light kiss on the cheek, leaving the prodigy a flustered mess. Bye, Itachi-kun. Satsuki-chan. She sprinted away, to hide her embarrassed face from being so upfront with Itachi. Itachi's cheeks were hinted red from the kiss, as he touched the area of the kiss. A soft smile appeared on his face. He turned his attention to his curious, little sister, who was confused as to why her brother was acting so odd. Come on, Satsuki, Itachi said, with a smile still on his face, let's get home. Satsuki smiled, with a nod in agreement before she leapt back onto her big brother's back to get carried home. On the walk back, Itachi still couldn't help but worry about Izumi's mentions of a boyfriend, but he had no proof or any reason to believe it. Satsuki always got embarrassed about stuff, whether they were truthful or not. Right. Flashback end. All these things led Itachi to the conclusion that Satsuki was either befriending someone outside the clan or gaining an odd passion for fishing. His first theory proved to be correct when he walked into Satsuki's bedroom and saw something that made his blood freeze. There were 2 vases, both vases filled with 10 red roses each. One looking 2 weeks older than the other. It was clear that someone had gifted them to his little sister. While Itachi was well aware of the fact that many young boys, both ucha or not, would attempt to get Satsuki's attention with roses or gifts, Itachi knew that Satsuki turned them all down without a second of remorse. It really inflated her ego, being an ice princess. To see that Satsuki had this many roses meant that she accepted them from someone with romantic intentions. Itachi's 3 Tomo Sharingans began to spin frantically as he looked for clues about the bastard that was seducing his innocent sister. What the hell? Itachi shouted in his mind. Of all the pressuring things going on his life right now, Satsuki's safety was number 1 on his priority list. Hee. Ard his sister's happy laughter from downstairs, obviously from a joke Shisui made, as he came over for dinner. Itachi took a deep breath to calm himself down. He didn't want to come across a paranoid for no reason. So he will work his recent Anbu training to solve this case tomorrow by following Satsuki after lunch. Espionage and interrogation. The next day, Satsuki left after lunch just like she normally does. Intent on getting to the Uzu Cove before Naruto, so she can devise a plan to prank him back. Over the last 2 weeks she has come to the Uzu Cove. It has been after Naruto had already arrived, giving him time to come up with an annoying prank to get her. He always manages to succeed. He would do stupid stuff, like paint seals, jumping out and scaring her when she didn't know he was there. Stink bombs. Buckets on water that come down from a tree and land on her head, making her soaking wet, and many, many more. While she plays it off as if it doesn't bother her, both her and Naruto know it is merely a front. They annoyed the hell out of her and she wants revenge, so she left right after lunch, taking some rice cakes with her, and she will attempt to use her advanced Shuriken Jutsu skills to scare Naruto. Unbeknownst to her, she was being trailed by a shadowy figure with menacing, crimson eyes. Uzu Cove. Satsuki arrived at the Uzu Cove though the secret, bamboo entrance, unaware that she was being followed. And began devising her prank on her blonde friend. She walked over to the unoccupied target board, which had a spare set of kunai and shurikens she took from the Uchiha clan inventory. Recently, she started learning how to implement ninja wire to change the trajectory of the shurikens and kunai, but today she will use them to terrorize a troublemaking, whiskered boy. So she began to scheme a way to manipulate the wire to trap the boy. She stroked her hand on her chin in a thinking gesture before her eyes sparkled with an idea, as she looked at the pink, cherry blossom trees. I can lead him towards the sakura tree, because he won't expect anything there, then I can use the wire trap to hang him by his foot. Ha ha ha. Beat that, Uzumaki. She mentally cheered for herself for the ingenious idea. Glad the blonde menace will be knocked down a peg. Watching from a branch of a nearby tree in the Uzu Cove was Itachi Uchiha. He just finished his morning training session at Anbu. Before he needed to report back at HQ in 30 minutes. He was surprised that he had to follow his little sister to the other side of the village, as she seemed to know exactly where she was going. Satsuki looked quite nervous about being followed, as she would tense every time there was a noise around, and frantically looked around whenever she stood still. Clearly she needs to work on her senses. It came to a shock when Satsuki navigated through a bamboo forest that led him into a natural sanctuary. It was a very beautiful clearing that looked very well looked after. Ukn. Iu Konoha had such lovely wildlife, the Anbu mused to himself. He narrowed his eyes when he caught sight of a patch of various flowers, especially the red ones. That must be where she got the red roses in her room, he thought for a moment. Could it be that she just picked some flowers for herself? Am I reading too much into this? I didn't come as a surprise if he jumped too fast to conclusions. That line of thinking stopped when he saw his sister setting up a classic wire trip on a sakura tree. Is she just practicing trap making? He smirked when he saw his sister use the ninja wire so diligently. She must have practiced a lot. The trap was a simple one with ninja wire, all it required was someone to get their foot wrapped up in it. It was a good trap for animals, but anyone with half a brain would be able to bypass it. So why was Satsuki making an animal trap? Finally, a loud boastful voice broke Itachi from his musing. He turned to see a young boy with blonde hair holding a steaming cup of ramen in his hand. After months of training, I have finally got to the Uzu Cove before my cup ramen gets cold. The boy said with a self-satisfied cheer. Itachi narrowed his eyes at the boy. Uzu Cove. He attempted to look for his sister, though she had vanished from view, leaving only a rice cake on the ground next to the trap. He used his sensing skills to find out that she was hiding in a sakura tree, but why? He looked back at the strange, blonde boy. He couldn't help but notice the whisker marks. Naruto Uzumaki, it was a name he had come to be familiar with during his first 3 weeks with the Anbu. The fact that Naruto is the Jinchuriki, it made him a valuable asset to the future of Konoha. Being an Anbu agent, he had to learn all of the important information. Inkle. Using the decree that the Sandaime implemented when Itachi was 8 years old about the blonde child's burden. Naruto's love for pranking also gained his attention, as it was the ANBU's job to stop any commotions in the village. But they tend to make the Chunin deal with the pranking Jinchuriki. He's also Yondaime-sama and Kushina-san's son. Yes, Itachi knows the truth about Naruto's heritage. With his level of intelligence, he can easily piece 2 and 2 together. Itachi didn't get much interaction with the late Hokage and his anti-figure, but from the brief time when he was just a child, he can see that Naruto takes after Kushina, in terms of his personality. One of the most important things the Hokage told him was to make sure Naruto stayed away from the Uchiha clan, as it would say more unnecessary distrust between the village and the clan, due to Naruto's burden and reputation. He didn't have anything against the young Uzumaki, he was just following Hokage's orders. That was why he was worried as to why Satsuki was interacting with the one boy the Hokage told him to keep at a distance. He would wait it out, as he didn't want to jump to any conclusion. Naruto was ecstatic. He once again got here before Satsuki, giving him the perfect opportunity to prank her with a new genius idea. He bought some tomatoes with the monthly allowance he got, and decided to fill them with flaming hot chili peppers. Satsuki would also boast about how she will be learning how to spit fire soon, so he wanted to put it to the test. He grinned mischievously, as he thought about his bees. Friend running around with a burnt tongue, before she would jump into the pond to cool it down. His daydreaming was cut off when he noticed something by the sakura trees. His eyes lit up as he caught sight of a fresh rice cake on a stone under the tree. It was really his lucky day today. He could use a side dish for his cup ramen. Seeing no reason not to follow his stomach, he ran over to the rice cake. Though before he could reach out, he felt something pull on his foot, and then he found himself swinging back and forth, with the world upside down. His beautiful cup ramen now spilled all to the leafy ground. Ahahaha. Naruto tried to turn to the sound of loud laughter of a girl who just jumped down from a tree branch, but he was currently swinging off a branch of a sakura tree, with his foot attached to a thread of ninja wire. When the swinging stopped, he was greeted with the sight of his best friend rolling on the ground, trying to control her laughter. He just grumbled while crossing his arms in an irritated gesture, annoyed he got pranked so easily. Ha, 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 good one, the blonde sarcastic said, in his driest voice possible, but the position he was in made Satsuki laugh even more. Naruto just decided to ignore the hysterical Uchiha and attempted to grab the rope, and pull it off his leg. It proved much harder than it seemed. Here, Satsuki said, finally, wiping the last of her tears of laughter, intent on helping her struggling friend get down. Naruto smiled as he assumed Satsuki would safely let him back down. That proved to be incorrect, when Satsuki took out a shuriken. After a deep breath, she flung it to cut the wire, causing the blonde boy to fall to the ground with a big thump. Oh! Naruto dramatically rubbed his bruised lump on his head. Satsuki rolled her eyes at Naruto's antics, though she did have a smug smirk. Naruto seemed to notice her cocky face, making him super angry, as he jumped right up into her face. Bastard! The heck do you think you're doing, Ibeo? His face was beet red in both anger and embarrassment. His nose was essentially touching Satsuki's. Naruto had no awareness of personal space. Satsuki just snorted. I was merely getting payback for all those pranks you played on me. She nonchalantly relied. Naruto seemed to calm down a bit after her reasoning. It was true, he did prank her a lot the last 2 weeks. Satsuki stared deadpan at him. I bet you were planning to prank me as you walked in here, especially with that grin you had earlier. Naruto simply rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish grin. She can read him like a book. Naruto crossed his arms and closed his eyes for a moment, seemingly in deep thought. Satsuki raised an eyebrow, wondering what her weird friend was doing. His eyes shot open, as he gave her a big thumbs up and a grin. It was pretty good, ya know. He complimented, Naruto Uzumaki. Pranked King of Konoha gives you a 7/10. Satsuki blinked dryly at Naruto's lame antics. She just sighed and shook her head. Idiot. She definitely deserved higher than a 7, damn it. Naruto started, wanting to move on from his embarrassing moment. What do you wanna do today? They could go fishing, or swimming, or play hide and seek, or practice shuriken. He still couldn't hit the target, or something new. Before Satsuki had a chance to respond, a new voice cut through them. How about you answer my questions? Satsuki's eyes widened. She knew that voice better than any other. Ni-san. She stuttered, turning to face her brother who was casually leaning against a tree. He still had his Anbu attire on. Naruto squinted his eyes at the new person, Ni-san. He was about to question who this person was, before something occurred to him. Hey! The blonde shouted to the older boy, who raised an eyebrow at him, you can't be here. Naruto pointed an accusing finger at the Anbu. There's no way you could have found an entrance to this place, Datbeo. He was pretty pissed off that someone found his safe haven so easily. Itachi looked boredly at the boy. I saw you come this way, I merely followed. That may have been a lie, but he didn't want his sister to be blamed for something out of her control. Speaking of his sister, Satsuki was pale as a ghost. She tried so hard to keep this a secret, but for Itachi to find out so easily meant she might have been followed by more people. Satsuki turned to her best friend, who was mumbling something about trying to learn security seals and barriers. Naruto, she started, making the boy look at her. Satsuki pointed at the older Uchiha. This is my brother, Itachi Uchiha. She was proud to introduce Itachi to Naruto, even if it was slightly bittersweet that her secret was found out. Naruto gaped in shock. This was the Itachi that Satsuki would mention 10 times a day. He looked the stoic boy up and down, before squinting his eyes at him. He doesn't look like much, he bluntly remarked, causing Satsuki's eyes to widen and Itachi to raise another delicate eyebrow. Idiot. She banged Naruto's already bruised head. Don't say that about Ni-san. As much as Satsuki likes Naruto, she will not tolerate any Itachi slander. Naruto's retort was cut off when Itachi spoke. It's nice to finally meet you, Naruto-kun. He walked away from his tree towards the frozen blonde, before taking his little hand and giving it a manual shake. Satsuki hasn't mentioned you at home. He looked for his sister's reaction, and saw her gulp slightly, before looking back at Naruto, whose mouth was agape, yet no words came out. Itachi gave Naruto a slightly hard stare, still without activating his Sharingan. Any particular reason for that? He asked, though he had already come to a logical conclusion. He could tell that Naruto was afraid of scaring Satsuki off if an adult told her to stay away from him. Itachi had seen the looks the public gives Naruto from his patrol and some mission around the village, including cleaning up after one of his pranks. Satsuki, who can be very loyal, agreed not to tell her family. But he wanted to hear it from the boy himself. Well you see. Bad start, Itachi thought. Suki and I met a few weeks ago, and since then we play sometimes. Naruto managed to stutter out. Itachi cocked an eyebrow in interest. She lets him call her Suki. That was a surprise. What kind of influence has this boy had on her? He had never seen his sister so comfortable around someone that wasn't in their family. Before Itachi could ask him more, Satsuki stepped in. Ni-san. Wait. She ran in between Naruto and Itachi, putting her hands up in a defensive gesture, protecting Naruto from questioning. Don't blame Naruto. She defended Naruto. Itachi just gave her a curious look, asking her to elaborate. Satsuki sighed in defeat, knowing she had to tell her secret encounters to Itachi, who might stop her meeting with her best friend. When I went shopping in Main Street a few weeks ago, I met Naruto outside the academy. She didn't want to mention anything about the looks Naruto got. She would ask that later. We talked a lot and had fun. So we started meeting after lunch. She trailed off, meekly. She hoped that Itachi would not force her to stay away from Naruto. Itachi mentally approved of her friendship with Naruto, glad she wouldn't be stuck following the clan blindly, and making friends outside the confinement of the Uchiha clan. Itachi was in deep thought, wondering what to do. While I think her spending time with Naruto will be a good influence on her, if anyone finds out the Uchiha princess is befriending the Jinchuriki, the reputation and distrust towards the clan will increase. Sadly, he sighed, then he thought for a moment. As he looked around the beautiful clearing, getting in here was pretty difficult. I doubt I would have found it if I didn't follow Satsuki. Maybe if they just spend time here, and at the academy it will be fine. Alright. Itachi's voice made the two 6-year-olds turn their attention back to him. As long as you only meet here, it will be fine if you spend time together. Both children's eyes lit up in happiness. But they dimmed slightly. Satsuki, I want you to cover up your Uchiha clothing whenever you come here. At Satsuki's confused stare, he elaborated, having an Uchiha running around the other side of the village from the compound can bring unnecessary attention to you. Satsuki nodded, as she noticed she would get stares whenever she walked through the areas away from the compound. Naruto-kun. Naruto nervously nodded to the older boy. I can put up a genjutsu to better hide the area. Naruto just looked at him like he grew a second head. What's a genjutsu? He ignorantly asked. making Itachi sigh. He should have expected Naruto to lack the knowledge of genjutsu. He turned to his little sister, wanting her to explain his specialty to the blonde, which she excitingly did. Eager to show off her knowledge to her stupid friend. A genjutsu is an illusionary technique. She happily recited the definition she found in a scroll. It can affect all 5 senses of the person it's used on, and can make them see something that's not there, to confuse them. Satsuki was really excited about the prospect of learning genjutsu. Once she awakens her Sharingan, she will be super good at them. Naruto looked awestruck. Wow. He whispered out. He wanted to do that too. But that could wait, he still had to know what was going on. Wait, Itachi-san. He still looked confused. How will a genjutsu help hide the Yuzu Cove? Itachi looked at the boy. I can cast a double-layer genjutsu at that bamboo entrance, making it seem sealed off, as anyone who comes across won't think twice about. Though you and Satsuki will know it is open. Itachi is already considered one of the best genjutsu specialists in the village, up there with Shisui, his father, Kurenai Yuhi, and members of the Kurama clan. Nobody below high Jonin level should be able to break through one of his precise genjutsu, even if it is very simple. It shows how powerful he is, that it would take a skilled sensor to see through his illusions. Naruto formed an face in understanding. Satsuki also intently listened interested in learning more about her brother's speciality. But how will I see through it? Naruto scrunched his nose up in confusion. You said genjutsu affects people's senses, right? Itachi nodded, so Naruto continued, so won't I also be affected? I don't know how to see through that stuff, he admitted, making Itachi smirk. It was a good question. I can dispel the genjutsu on both you and Satsuki, Naruto-kun. He explained. Once it is dispelled, you will be able to walk through the area without anyone noticing you, as they will be caught up in the illusion. Naruto nodded his head rapidly with closed eyes. He still didn't understand, but he would pretend he did. Itachi looked down at his watch and saw he had 15 minutes to get back to Anbu HQ. Satsuki, the girl looked up at her brother. I need to get back to work, so don't come home too late. Satsuki nodded. Itachi smirked at the target board with several kunai pierced into the center. Keep up the good work with Shuriken Jutsu. Satsuki beamed with a happy smile. Naruto-kun, Itachi said to the knucklehead blonde, who hummed in question, good luck in the academy next week. He gave the boy a smile. Satsuki will need a friend, so look out for her. Satsuki's cheeks lit up in embarrassment. It was true she didn't have many friends. Naruto gave Itachi a big salute. You bet, he promised, with a foxy grin, someone has to keep her safe. He offended her offhandedly, making Satsuki growl at Naruto. I don't need protection from someone who can't even hit the target board with a shuriken. Satsuki snapped back, making Naruto blush. I was aiming for the tree. He attempted to defend himself. Yeah right, you couldn't even hit the tree. I'll hit you. You couldn't even hit me if I stood in front of you with a big sign. She smugly retorted. The 6 years got in each other's faces, both clenching their teeth with scowls. Bastard. Idiot. Itachi merely blinked at the odd sight before him before he began walking away from the duo with a small smile on his face. Naruto Uzumaki, please look out for her. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out my Patreon. Details in description.